We are, because it's up on the monitor. Yeah, that's close.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone here to our normal Board of Commissioners meeting. It's March 20th, 9 a.m. Would you please rise and join me in our Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Commissioner Boyce, do you have your morning report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, last night we lost an officer. We made it almost a week without an additional loss. Right now we are at 24. Again, comparing, Mr. Chair, to 2018, we lost 150 officers in the line of duty. If I may ask for a moment of silence, our friends in New Zealand, the senseless slaughter of the people that were lost there. Our country and other civilized countries have condemned in the strongest possible terms, and our heart just goes out for that despicable act. And so, yes, if we could, sir, have a moment of silence, I would appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I have one quick announcement?
Yes.
I understand congratulations are in order. Chris Bash, Commissioner, has been appointed by the President, the National Association of Counties, as the Veterans for Families and Military, that committee. This is a huge thing for Curry County. The veterans will be incredibly well represented, and I just really want to congratulate you. Very, very proud to serve with you. Thank you very much.
Proud to do it. All right, so do we have any amendments to the agenda? Commissioner Gold.
I have one. I noticed the executive session is right after public comments. I would suggest that be at the end of the meeting, right after other, I would think.
Council huddle?
Yeah, that works for me, and some of the material we're going to cover in the exec session deals with litigation, and then we have a presentation by our, I think, Able Insurance Company as well, so it would make sense to put the exec session materials prior to the insurance presentation.
Okay, so why don't we put them, let's do the executive session right after commissioner updates, and then we'll do the Able Insurance presentation, as well as Ms. Kallstrom's presentation for the budget preparation. All right. So we'll move forward to 9 is what it'll be. Well, actually, everything will come up one, but anyway. Translucently, it'll be number 9. So, any other amendments to the agenda? Commissioner Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A month ago, when we had the Second Amendment folks here, abbreviated as SASO, I believe that we committed to a workshop for them at some point in time. And I may not have a clear recollection, but I think we said it would be an evening meeting. I believe we have some agreement that could be done April 10th, and be 5:30 in the evening, have 2 separate workshop agenda items. And so I want to ask the board for approval on that, and if that is the same commitment that you recall, or if I perhaps have that incorrect.
Well, I thought we had discussed this, and we had decided to forego any evening meetings right now until the road issues are straightened out, which they're saying they will not. They won't have it blacktopped until September or October, I believe, is what I read. But they'll have 2 lanes open near the end of May, beginning of June. So we were going to forego all of our evening meetings until that time. As far as this group, you know, we did agree to have a workshop at some point, but I thought the gist of our conversation was later into the year, May or June area, because we weren't going to get it on the May ballot anyway, that we could forego that for a time. So I personally would like to see it pushed out, you know, until we get the 2 lanes open all the way to Brookings, and that provides access for everyone. Commissioner Gold?
My recollection was there was no agreement to have an evening meeting with them. It was just a workshop. That was the only thing we agreed to.
So, Mr. Chair, that I think that probably is accurate, because I was a little uncertain on that, but I don't see the need to postpone it. The highway is really not an issue right now, and it will end up being 6 weeks from the time we essentially made that commitment to the time we're able to do it on April 10th. And an evening meeting gives a greater number of people the opportunity to travel here, whether it may not just be from the South County area as well. So I'd rather not postpone.
Okay, I see the sheriff has stepped up to the microphone, sir.
Good morning, Commissioners. I had an attorney, a retired attorney, look into and do some research on this. I have a packet that I want to send you guys before you make a decision on it. It gives you a little bit more information. That's just FYI.
Thank you, Sheriff. And the whole, excuse me, go ahead.
Commissioner Gold?
I also had an attorney send me some information on this issue, and I will share that with others as far as national laws, state laws, all of that. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The objective was to have both sides well represented in that workshop. And in addition to that, if you recall, that same meeting, coincidentally, we had a lady from the Hunter Creek area that had give public comment that the gun activity she felt was out of order and disturbing the peace in her neighborhood. And you know, my wish was to as well include that in part of the workshop agenda and challenge local folks to be very responsible in their gun ownership. So again, I'm gonna ask the board to consider the 5:30 meeting on April 10th, which is of course a Wednesday. And I don't know if we have another workshop item at this time, but I'm sure there would be. So
well, I'd like to do this, if you don't mind. We'll have time between now and then, because we're going to have another meeting in a week. Let's forego the decision on this for a week. Let's get the information that the sheriff has, that anyone else has about, you know, any language on this, and that way there we can all be fully informed before we make a decision on it. And I'm not saying let's not do this on April 10th. I'm saying let's just forego the confirming of that until after, you know, a few more days until we can get all the information we need.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other amendments to the agenda?
One, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you again. Just a question on our Resource Advisory Task Force. Are we, for the most part, appropriately organized with that group as we move forward?
The board did agree to continue on with that committee, so we did post an ad seeking members, so we're waiting for members. We don't have enough to, it's a 7-member board, I believe, and we don't have a full membership yet.
Okay, so we do have 2 that have that resigned, as I understand, have offered to come back into that committee.
If they have offered to come back in, I don't believe we've received the application yet.
Okay, thank you. I'll make sure that you get that information.
Anything further? Can I get a motion, please?
I move that we approve the agenda as amended.
Have a second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
Any further comments? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Yes?
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, we're going to look to some public comments here. First one is Mary Rowe. This is on the homeless count. Morning, Miss Rowe.
Hi, what do you want me to do with this thing?
Just leave it sitting there.
Well, it was right here where I was going to put my
The
thing.
timer, JJ.
Just push it right up on the top of, right up there, yeah, that's fine.
I had a nightmare
You can
last
lay it
night
down,
about
please.
this thing.
gizmo.
No. There you go, just like that.
I hate it.
Sorry.
This air is kind of, well, okay, whatever. Okay, I'm Mary Rowe, and I'm here about the Curry County Point in Time homeless count. According to the March 16th Curry Coastal Pilot, 137 homeless people were counted in Curry this January. This in contrast to 1,299 homeless people being counted in Coos County. I'm concerned about the low number of Curry homeless residents counted, as the distribution of resources often depends on these numbers, and our count is lower in the extreme than our actual homeless population. Our count has been conducted inefficiently for years. This is partly due to the poor organization in Curry by ORCA. While in Coos County, ORCA held 3 one-hour orientation meetings at different times and places, in Curry they had 1 2-hour meeting in South County at a time that was too early for public transportation to get disabled and other residents from North and Central County to the meeting. The pilot's announcement did not give meeting details, and the contact person was in Coos Bay and hard to reach. Those of us who have helped with the count before did not need a 2-hour orientation meeting, especially since there were no changes this year. This requirement reduced the number of counters. Students in only 2 schools were counted. A meeting attendee informed me that self-identification by homeless people with respect to categories such as disability could be overridden by the surveyor, as that could help us get more funding. This could result in inaccuracies and is not ethical. Counters, veterans, have recently been going to homeless people's camps, which can traumatize the many homeless women who've been assaulted and cause other problems. This practice has been foisted on us by ORCA. I recommend that we in Curry take back control of how we do our homeless count. Years ago, the ORCA director would meet with those of us who work with the homeless to go over the form and explain any changes. Then we would organize our count, each of us sharing what we were going to do. I would do the street count in one part of the county in conjunction with the disbursement of clothing and supplies. Those of us who had attended the meeting were entrusted with explaining the process to our helpers. We spent weeks putting up many notices and using media and word of mouth and gathering donations, etc. We chose to non-evade homeless people's last fragment of safety and privacy, their camps. We included gathering places such as schools, state parks with rangers doing the count, Oasis, the jail, the transit waiting spots, food banks, ORCA, veterans organizations, DHS, huge disbursements, the area outside the post office, a mental health self-program, soup kitchens, and had Native American representatives and homeless folks assist us as liaisons. This collaboration and massive effort by an experienced group who decided how to do the count while partnering with ORCA rather than allowing ORCA to dictate how is needed again. One improvement could be written survey instructions that all could read and sign. Will you empower those of us who work with homeless people by spearheading a Curry collaboration?
I'll take that as a challenge. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you. Carl King?
Carl King, Nasika Road. My main topic today is Curry County Voices. As you may have read in the newspaper, we are holding a town hall at the library on April 20th. We have put on that agenda all 3 ballot measures, separated, and structured it, we believe, in a way that people employed by the county can participate and make factual presentations, because we've separated the factual presentation with a question and answer period and with the advocacy to follow all factual presentations. I'll hand out our flyer that you'll see around. We are looking for people who are willing to participate as a factual presenter, either presenting facts in support of an affirmative vote, and facts, if any, in support of a negative vote. And it's open to the public. It's being performed by Curry County Voices at no expense to the county. There is no county assets being used for this, so that we believe, I defer to Mr. Huddle as to how much those people in the county who have great knowledge on these issues can participate who are not elected officials, but we look forward to participation. Just so that, you know, several asides, we would like to have a workshop opportunity with the commissioners to talk about PEG's channels and Curry County Voices. We've now been on the air, if you will, for 6 months. We have over close to 30 programs on the Curry County Voices website that we have recorded, edited, and most of them have been on Channel 182 at one time or another. This last weekend, we premiered 5 new programs, and we have others in the process covering the full range of interest within the county. There are also happenings, Mr. Chairman, where you last were in Washington, D.C., that may have a substantial impact on you, more so than on us. The FCC is making rule changes that you need to be aware of, and I am prepared to help, you know, make a presentation on that at the website. But I just think it's time to report back and let you know what we're doing, where we're headed, and the tremendous support we're getting, growing support from the community, both in the way of volunteers who are willing to spend their time filming and editing and the like. And Commissioner Boyce, I'd like to thank you for the moment of silence. It was well needed, and you know, I appreciate your reporting on the number of law enforcement officers who die year to date. I do feel compelled, though, to tell you that year to date in the United States, guns have been used to kill 48 children under the age of 12. 48, twice as many children under the age of 12 have died and been killed by someone using a gun, sometimes themselves by accident. The only one I know of in Oregon, an 11-year-old was shot and killed by his father, who then shot his own father and committed suicide. I think as part of the Second Amendment discussion, we need to be aware that there are casualties, unintended casualties of positions we take. Thank you.
A couple questions, Mr. King.
Yeah, don't go away so fast.
I won't voice too much of my opinion on your last statement, because yes, there are casualties with weapons, but many lives are also saved with weapons. Just from the reporting of the New Zealand, when the guy grabbed the shotgun that the assailant had thrown down and threatened the man with his own shotgun, and that's what got him to stop firing and run. So many more may have died if he had not grabbed that weapon. So we can find good and bad in everything, and weapons are one that we can find a lot of very good in, as well as a lot of very bad. On this Curry County Voices, I commend you for this. I hope that everything will be fairly treated, and my question to you on these ballot measures is, if you get someone that wants to lobby for, that is conversing with the public for, but you don't have someone against, will you still let that person present on the for, because that may wrongly sway people? And
absolutely. It's open. People have a choice. I've not heard of anyone. I know there are people who have an interest in the second advisory opinions that I expect will want to come and voice factual presentations and advocate for. But again, it's set up. We're there for 3 hours. We technically will allocate at least 1 hour to each question. And again, it'll be factual presentation in favor, Q&A, factual presentation, if any, opposed, Q&A, and then an open discussion for advocacy of that issue before we then move on to the second one.
Okay, well, I appreciate that because I just, like I said, I'd like to make sure that everything is fair. You know, especially when we get politics involved into things, people's hearts get in, and sometimes not their minds, but their hearts get into things, and it becomes very heated. You know, there's some radio stations that lean one way or the other hard, and some television stations that do the same. And I'm hopeful that we can keep this as fair as possible.
You know, our goal is to do that, and you know, we're, as some of you may know, we're working with the League of Women Voters, and we did tour their forums last fall, and people abused the league rules and cut and pasted and sliced and diced out stuff for their campaign ads. And to help the league avoid that this year, we've agreed with the league that we will film for them. We will put it on our website, but not on YouTube or on the channel, so that it'll be more difficult for someone to abuse that service. Unfortunately, the internet is what it is.
Yes, I know.
People can slice, dice, and pick and choose, and we can't control that. And one of the reasons we absolutely need to have that platform available is what's happening at the FCC that may make you may be forced in a year or less or more to choose between having Channel 182 or having reduced general franchise fees.
Yep.
That's coming.
Council Huddle?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question I would have, Carl, is, Mr. King, is during the candidate forum, you know, it's very easy to identify the speakers, the people who have put their names on the ballot. And so it's easy to get the two different views. Usually the idea is equal time for the different views on the different measures. Are you affirmatively going out to seek the different views on these, or are you just saying we are having this, come and talk?
Well, I've had a conversation with one person who questions the marijuana tax. I have, before scheduling this, had conversations with a restaurant owner in Gold Beach about a consumption tax on restaurants. I intend to follow up with them and see if somebody wishes to come and make a factual presentation. And, you know, I know that you have staff that are very knowledgeable and who could speak on factual presentations, I believe. It's up to Mr. Huddle how that goes, but I think the three commissioners as elected officials can certainly speak and not worry about going over the line between a factual presentation and advocacy.
Follow-up, Mr. Chair, if I could. Thank you. So you say it's up to me, but actually I think it's the state elections board or whatever body enforces the election laws. And I can only speak from personal experience from the last jurisdiction I worked in. We had two measures on the ballot. They were to raise bonds to build police and fire stations. So naturally the League of Women Voters in that county wanted the police chief and the fire chief to come and present. They did, and they were each fined by the elections body. They felt in their opinion they were giving factual information. They were not elected officials, they were appointed, and the elections body felt differently, and they each received a fine. So I would caution any public employee, and so again, I think, and with the numbers on a lot of these, they seem so much like their projections to see, you know, whether a projection is a factual representation or not to me. So I would advocate caution on any county employee, but the elected officials certainly are able to go and talk.
I think Port Orford took that risk with their law enforcement thing in March and did have factual presentations by people who were not elected officials. So again, when I defer to you, Mr. Huddle, I defer to you and your interpretation of state law. I don't practice Oregon law.
Mr. Boyce?
Thank you.
Just quick comment, your willingness to offer help on a workshop so we can understand the FCC rule changes. I wasn't really aware of that, to be honest, and so, but it's not lacking complication, and yes, I think that's something we're going to need to understand, and thanks for making that offer.
It's been not a well-kept secret. The community media is very aware of it and working actively. The comment period has ended on the rule change, but congressional members can make comments, and there's a real campaign to get comments in. But it could eliminate your cash 5% franchise fee. They would, under the new rule, they'd be able to apply in-kind benefits. So if they have provided you the outlet here for their programming that the franchise agreement provides for, they can take credit for that. If they've provided outlets in the schools and libraries, which they may provide, they can take credit for that. And if they provide you a public access PEG channel, they can decide that that channel has a value of X dollars, and the next time after that rule goes into effect, your check from Charter will be reduced by that amount. And I would not like to see you're put in a position where you have to choose between $130,000 a year of revenue and being able to have citizens watch your meetings and our programming on Channel 182.
Thank you, sir. David Barnes? Really? JJ, note that, will you, please? No, come on.
Never mind, since you forced me into it. I'm David Barnes. Today's March 20th. We've made it through another winter. Happy spring.
It is
right.
spring day.
All right, so it's public comments. Can I get a motion on the consent agenda for the minutes?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as written.
Second.
Mr. Chair, good job, JJ.
Any further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold?
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce?
Aye.
Chair Pash?
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Okay, action items. Number 6A, appoint 2 of the 3, Marcella Watermans, Kevin McHugh, or Teresa Lawson to the Compensation Board. We need 2 of the 3, is that right, Julie?
Yes.
Commissioner Gold.
After looking at the applications, I would suggest that we have Kevin McHugh and Teresa Lawson on the Compensation Board. And I'll make that as a motion.
Do I have a second? With no second, motion fails. Commissioner Boyce?
Question quickly, if I may. Is Waterman spelled correctly there? Is there an S on the end of that? Whoops, excuse me.
No,
I thought it was W-A-T-E-R.
so if I could, and I don't know about the spelling, but I just wanted to say, so I have a question for Julie Schmelzer. We have 2 openings and 3 candidates.
Yes.
Yes.
So what we've done in the past is basically say position 1, and we just we poll the board of who they want to put in position 1, and if we get 2 votes for a candidate in position 1, then position 1's filled, and then we go to position 2, and the remaining candidates are voted on to do that, instead of trying to just do a motion. It's possible to do a motion to fill both, but sometimes just doing a, is
Right.
there and you just do a ballot roll call. So that's an option.
Well,
and
we've
done
already
that in the
halfway
past.
through this, so let's
Okay,
just go
very good.
on. Do we have a second motion?
I'm going to follow council's recommendation here and make a motion, Mr. Chair, if I may. Sure. By the way, we've done this silent before through a secret ballot, which, this is tough duty. So I'm going to make a motion for position 1, Kevin McHugh.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Roll?
Commissioner Gold?
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce?
Yes.
Chair Pash?
Aye.
Kevin McHugh appointed to Commission 1 unanimously.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to make a motion to appoint Marcella Waterman for the 2nd position open on the Compensation Board.
Do I have a second? I'll make that second. Any further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold?
No.
Vice Chair Boyce?
Yes.
Chair Pash?
Yes.
Marcella Waterman's appointed to position 3 on the compensation board. By a vote of 2 to 1.
Action item 6B, procedure to pay claims not covered by insurance. Council Huddle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We recently had a situation out of the road department where a tree fell in the road, and usually our road department would, pay for that, or just not pay for it, but just go and clear the tree out of the road. In this case, a local citizen used their own funds to clear the tree out of the road and asked us for reimbursement, and we submitted the claim to our insurance company, and they said, well, county, you don't have any liability here in the insurance context. And so what we're looking at is a methodology to authorize payment of claims where it's not covered by our insurance. And in the packet, I presented materials. It's a process that I've been using in a prior jurisdiction for years, and so I presented the materials from the prior jurisdiction at the City of Medford, and they had a process there. And I think if you look at that, they allow the finance director to approve up to a $50,000 claim before going to their city council. I think our proposal is to have the director of operations with review and approval from county council up to $10,000. So it's a similar process to what is done in other jurisdictions, and is to allow us to pay claims where they're otherwise not paid for by our insurance. And it's just it's a very basic concept. I don't think we needed a complete workshop study session on it, and I don't have much more to offer than that.
Commissioner Gold.
My curiosity is just killing me. I'm wondering how much would the road department have paid to take care of that issue versus how much this individual is asking for? Because I don't think we should pay more than what the road department would pay to take care of the issue.
Mr. Christensen.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Yeah, we actually did a cost estimate on that. Let me pull that up. If they would have reached the road department and called us, we would have responded and cleaned up that tree, and it would have cost us $693 to perform that work. And so due to the logistics of getting equipment and people down there, but we did have a flagger out there work 3 hours, watch traffic as this private contractor remove the tree per the customer's request, and their cost was $600
for a flagger.
For the contractor to remove the tree, and our cost would have been $693. But the cost for our staff to stand there 3 hours and watch that work was $188. So was proposing that we kind of figure all that together and maybe reimburse the customer the balance.
I have a question. I understand that Council Huddle, what you're asking for here is not specific to this. You're asking for a policy would be put into place
that would allow us to carry out the concepts
like this, not necessarily this one in particular.
We're not asking for board approval of this reimbursement request.
Right.
No, this is just an example.
You're asking for a broader scope on that.
Yeah.
Mr. Christensen, my question on this particular one was did this person just automatically take it upon themselves, or did they contact the highway department and with no answer, then they took it upon themselves?
I believe they tried to reach the road department, but they didn't know who to call. They called Harbor Water, and they called different agencies.
Okay, that's fine. All right, thank you. All right, so what you're asking then is that that we have a system in place to be able to address these through Ms. Schmelzer and then through council as well.
Right. In other words, so if I could just elaborate a little further, the board, I believe, has delegated $10,000 contracting authority to the director of operations and some department heads, the roadmaster, for instance. And so I have proposed in this the same level of authority for contract spending without board approval as for the claims processing without board approval. And that was also the basis of the Medford ordinance. They had a $50,000 department head contracting approval, so they put the claims approval at $50,000. So we're trying to take that, make it fit our circumstances here, and allow the director of operations to handle claims against the county under $10,000. Anything above that would go to the board, and then the board could approve it.
Commissioner Gold?
Could part of the ordinance be, or resolution, whatever you're going to call it, be that we don't pay more than what the county could have done it for? And I would think that's common sense.
Sure, and not every circumstance will be a
It's
claim
not-
that the county would have been able to do it for themselves.
Right, I agree.
And I think we have to trust Ms. Schmelzer and council that, you know, she's going to look at the whole picture of what occurred and the, you know, the whole assessment of the situation. You know, Mr. Christensen may say that, you know, we could have done that for $680, but once he got there and found that when the tree came over, a root cracked, you know, a culvert or pushed the side of the road out, now all of a sudden it would have been a lot more because, you know, of the situation. So I think there has to be a point that we trust, you know, the judgment of our director of operations as well as council. And this is something that we would see on a weekly or monthly billing cycle through our HR department anyway. So, you know, it's something that we can closely monitor as well as the board. So I have no problem with it being written the way it is.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Can I rewind just for a second? How big a tree was this, if I may ask, at the base?
I have pictures of it. I would say,
You might need to come to the microphone.
Sorry, Roadmaster,
I apologize.
I know we're not on that.
I would say it was probably 40 feet tall, and it fell from the property line of the customer that paid the $600 to have it removed, all the way across a 22-foot wide street and into the yard across the street a little bit. And so it was a cul-de-sac, and so people at the end of the cul-de-sac actually, they even drove through the neighbor's yard to get out.
So how big at the base? I mean, we're talking a 2-foot tree? Oh, it was good size.
I'd say
Okay.
2 foot, but it was a shrub type tree. It was real bushy.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And by the way, when you said resolution ordinance, this is an ordinance, and this is the first reading of the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thanks again. I'll support this. I just don't want to be the last to know on some of these kind of issues. If we're going to authorize 10,000, may be a good number, but I just want to know when these kind of issues come up and what the county responsibility, even liability is. So I'll trust certainly Director Schmelzer on that as well.
I actually think 10,000 is a little steep myself, but again, I think anything of that magnitude that happens in this county, for as small of a county as we are, if we don't know about it, it's somebody's probably not paying attention. So.
Well said. Thank you.
So I will support this as well. Do we need a motion on that, Council?
Yeah, it would be a motion to approve an ordinance amending the codified ordinances, adding Article 1, Division 20, procedure for paying claims.
I'll make that motion. Do I have a second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion?
Does not have a number yet, correct?
No, we assign the numbers after they get adopted.
Thank you.
Roll call.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce,
Yes.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Next up will be C, Day Wireless presentation. What I'd like to ask is, how long do we think this presentation is going to be?
That would be up to you, sir. We're just going to provide the information you already have, and then you guys can make a decision on it.
Okay. Because we have to take a break at 10 o'clock for 10 minutes anyway, so it might be good we do part of the presentation and then we take a break, chew on it, and then come back to it. All right.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is Sheriff Ward from the Curry County Sheriff's Office. Today we're here to talk about the proposal by Day Wireless to replace a microwave system that has failed. And we've talked about it for several years about the end of life and the equipment on there that is not supported by the manufacturers anymore. As you know, we had a catastrophic failure in December, around the first part of December, that took communications out of all of our South County. And we had deputies going flying blind to areas and high-profile cases without communication. And you all know we all didn't sleep real well that whole month until we got Day Wireless back, who has been a tremendous partner in getting our communications back up. And not only just our communications, but just everyday equipment stuff that we go through Day Wireless. They've been a great partner. So with the catastrophic failure that we had, and which I don't know if we need to reiterate that or not, but of course the microwaves went down. We had to replace parts on Bosley from Black Mound, and then order parts that were sometime non-existent, that are not supported, but spare parts. Just to remind the board that Day Wireless looked for and got a spare dish from ODOT at no cost and brought it down here and replaced that dish. But at this point, we've agreed. You guys have set a county emergency communications on a emergency communication issue. So Day Wireless stepped up, did an engineering plan and proposal, and came up with a cost to replace the microwave system. That's the backhaul for everything that we do in communications for dispatch, patrol, fire, ambulance, road, for communications. So with that said, they came up with the proposal on the money-wise. You have been presented with that. If you have any other questions, I would like a decision made on this as soon as possible, because I don't sleep well at night either, in knowing that it could happen at any time. In order to get this replaced, I would love to have it replaced by the end of this summer, and before we go into next winter, and maybe go in the same issue that we had. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to have Calvin step up and answer them.
That'd be great. Calvin? Does anyone have any questions? Commissioner Boyce?
Just a complaint, Mr. Chair. This cover letter is excellent. It just, Agnes was spelled incorrectly. I just want to point that out.
Commissioner Gold?
I guess my big question is, you guys set up loans, no interest loans, is this right?
That would be a question that Cameron from sales would have to answer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm more of the technical side, so
Okay.
If you have any technical questions about the design, please ask away.
Well, I want to say that your second piece of information that Sheriff Ward got to me, I didn't get it till this morning. I understand Sheriff was in meetings all day yesterday and couldn't get it out till late. But I have gone on and researched some of this through Cambium, the 820s, on, some of the different materials that are going to be needed on this. And I didn't really get the equipment breakdown that I had hoped for. I know you and I had spoken about this on the phone, and I understand that you have to protect your company and your buying power and your bids. So I appreciate you breaking this down into each tower and the prescribed method of installation and everything else. Will this give us a complete?
It gives the county a ring with 2 spurs, all right? So the ring covers your core sites. The 2 spurs, and they should be within that proposal, are the Agnes site and the Cape Blanco site. So, but even that, we have a potential plan to bring another backhaul mechanism, at least to Cape Blanco right now. It's not radio related, possibly wireline related.
Okay.
As an emergency. So those are small details that we'll kind of hash out, but the engineered study or the engineered solution as you are presented is in fact a ring for the core sites with 2 spurs.
Another question I had, because I've had other commissioners in the last, actually they've saw, I guess somebody was on our website, was looking around other commissioners, and they're asking us questions about this. So I've had a few phone calls on this in the last couple of days. Do you share services? From what I understand, that we can now go statewide for shared services on a lot of our stuff. Have you ever done that, partnering with a neighbor county, or even leapfrogging a company or a county to another county for services?
In terms of interoperability,
Yes.
of the counties that I take care of, which are a total of 11, 12 counties, right now, there's no interoperability per se per county or within each county.
Okay.
Is that by design, or is that by, sometimes counties like to have their own, right? And they want to keep it that way.
Right.
I do see, though, progress between Jackson County and Josephine County, and they are actually looking at a microwave link between the two counties. So.
And that's what this would be. This was another neighboring county of ours that had spoken with me about possibly sharing those services, which would reduce our costs, of course.
Gotcha.
And I would ask this board to please be a little, and our sheriff, to be a little bit patient. There's actually a very important meeting taking place today that I can get more information on this, because it was handed to me last night at about 8 o'clock. But I would like to look into this a little farther. Another question on this is, I'm sorry, but this is the salesman in me, I guess. Can we sharpen the pencil a little sharper on this?
That is as sharp as we can get. As a matter of fact, I've already sharpened the pencil down on labor. The equipment is as sharp as it can be, because it is a contract pricing. So the Washington County contract pricing has a discount that's inherent. We can't, there's no manipulation, if you will, with that pricing.
Okay. On your extended warranty plan, it says 4 years extended warranty on the Cambium 820s only, and that's $27,000. How many 820s are we putting up? That's 6 links?
6 links, that is correct, yes.
Because on here I show and I'm going to say what I found going on different sites, is the average cost of an 820 is about $3,500. So that's basically rebuying all of those over a period of 4 years versus a warranty. Now, I'm not saying that that's all of the equipment that goes with that, but just the C1100, which is the PTP 820S, I guess is what it is on here.
And we quoted a G model.
Right. Okay. So I might not be comparing apples to apples.
Correct.
Okay.
And there are a total of 7 sites as we bring in Brookings for the ring.
Right. Well, I think that's the questions I had for you, sir.
All right.
Anyone else? I will make this statement. I will, like Sheriff Ward, I will not sleep at night knowing that there's a possibility of a firefighter, sheriff's deputy, or anyone in any service to this county that does not have everything they need to protect themselves and our constituents. We need to find a way to pay for this, however it needs to be paid for. I know we've spoken about, doing loan, working some kind of a loan out with you, and I don't know if Commissioner Gold had asked a question, if you could come up to speak further on that.
Morning, Commissioners. My name is Cameron Luigi. I'm an account manager for Day Wireless. My role in this process is essentially to advocate for the customer and make sure that your needs are heard, and that I can relay to my team what those needs are and work with you. With the question that you had about financing, we do work with a couple different very reputable companies, so it's not directly through Day Wireless, it's through specialists of financials. So Government Capital is a company that I've been working with on a few different projects. I'd be happy to email you all information and or put you in touch with their representatives. They have quoted some very competitive rates and very flexible plans, very flexible terms.
What was the name of that again?
It's called Government Capital.
Okay.
And I believe their website is govcap.com, if I'm not mistaken. And so just to kind of give you an idea of some of the flexibility they offer, they have helped customers of ours that have a certain amount of funding now and then not additional funding until July 1st. So they'll do like a short-term loan, or perhaps there is some type of promotion, or in a case like in Curry County, a crisis where an immediate purchase needs to be made, but they won't have funding until perhaps a year or even 18 months later, and they will do no money down loans until you need it. So that's one thing I like about government capital. They've had some very low rates on recent quotes that they've given me and my customers.
How low?
Do you have a ballpark?
Yeah, so there is a project that we're working on up in Yamhill County for about $300,000, and I believe they quoted around 5%.
That's awful. Okay.
And again, so I have no control over that.
I understand.
But I do actually work with more than one leasing company, because I have seen I do a lot of quotes these guys, and I've seen both of their rates do this over the last couple of years. Unfortunately, I feel like all interest rates have been, creeping up in all aspects of.
Does Day Wireless get a finder's fee, or for lack of a better word, a bump
Nope.
off the interest rate on the back end?
We do not.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Vice Chair, do you
Oh,
have a
no,
question?
I'm waiting for you.
We have no involvement in that, so that would be, we would put you in touch with them, and then you would have your direct contact and relationship, and once you come to an accord, they would write us the check on your behalf, or they would give you the money and then you would write the check. So
basically they're doing bridge loans is what they're doing.
I'm
They're not going full amortization loans. They're doing basically a bridge loan.
Yep, financing.
I would have to put you in touch with. I'm sorry, I'm not a financial expert in that matter. It's just one way that we've tried to help our customers.
Okay.
The other company that we work with is called Leasing Corporation of America. I don't recall what their website is, but LCA. It might be leasecorp.com.
Okay.
They're a little more rigid in their format, in that they require a certain down payment, and then they will do 5 or 6 year loans. The 6 year is specific for exceptional credit. For government capital, they actually, one thing I like about them for their flexibility, they've done up to 10-year loans. And so for large projects that are, surprise, but you don't have a budget for them, that can be a useful tool.
Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank you both there's been a tremendous amount of work that has gone into this proposal, and the Sheriff's Department, all inclusive there. I want to highlight a little bit that, Sheriff Ward just reminded us that we're looking at August 31st, and I think that needs to be a goal. And if it's not a realistic goal, we need to make it. That's only 180 days, 5 months. And so that's what we're up against here. So I do appreciate very much and agree totally with your approach and how we might, if there's some good news for us out there and how we can accelerate this. I'm also looking at House Bill 2449, not incredibly optimistic, but that might actually be some state funding that could come back. So we'll know more on that within maybe 30 days. But I just want to kind of highlight that, that August 31st date is something we really need to pursue.
Question. Another question, and this may require your answer. If we were to sign this today, when could we assume or look for as a installation, turn the key on date? And let me also put another question on there. Service, continuing service for the sheriff while we're installing this new system. Do you leave the old system up and let it run, and after the new system's installed and the bugs are worked out, you switch one on and switch the other off?
What we would prefer to do is take down each link one at a time. So if we take down that link, we have the 2 tower crews at 2 individual sites. They install the new gear. We cut over that site in the fashion that works currently with your analog system. We confirm the levels. We make sure that we don't have any fade margin or loss. And then we cut that link over, take down your existing dishes. We then move to the next path.
So this new equipment, the digital will talk with analog?
Yep.
Well, okay.
Yep.
And what would be a finish date or a go date if we were to sign this, let's say the beginning of April?
That's a great question. It's going to be really depending upon the manufacturer's availability for the parts, but let's just assume that they're 90 days out for sake of argument. My goal would, as I was speaking with the sheriff earlier, we want to get this installed before the next rains come, in particular when we're dealing with microwave. And we're not dealing with a Category 5 or Cat 6 fed outdoor unit radios. We're dealing with, actual waveguide is moisture sensitive. So I would hope to have it, let's say if you sign it today, what is it?
April 1st.
April 1st, right? Okay. I would say August timeframe,
Okay.
roughly.
I just dread a phone call from our sheriff saying, guess what? We lost our service again, and I've got a deputy out there on a call, and he can't ask for help.
And we all...
No, I dread that call too, and because I am the first person the sheriff calls, and when that phone, as we were talking on a Sunday, rings, and I know it's him, I think of the worst because of the degradation of the current system.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
One last, the Cambium 820, it is a G series. It is both IP as well as capable of T1 spans. We required that equipment because of your existing solution. It's also a hot standby system as well, so just keep that in mind. Okay. There's a lot that goes into engineering a system, and when we look at the parts, and believe me, I'm not in sales, I understand where you're coming from. It's a big chunk of change to chew off. I mean, it is. But it's very reasonable, it's very robust, and it'll complete a ring for your core sites, which is the goal.
And for me, I only did 5 or 6 hours of research on this. I'm just pulling stuff up off the internet. You guys have been doing this for a long time. So my questions were just general questions about
Absolutely.
things.
Absolutely.
I try to learn what I can learn about something before we make a decision on it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Sheriff?
Thank you.
There has been a ton of work put in on this by Day Wireless and us, and I appreciate your guys' concern about cost-wise with the county. But if we don't act now, it's going to cost the county a heck of a lot more money in the long run. And there is a way to pay for it now. If you're going through like a finance thing, that's up to you guys how you want to do this, but it's going to cost more money for interest and everything when we have the money to pay for it up front, and then try to reimburse our road reserve fund somehow to get back in the thing. So Rich was at our last meeting, and he understands as far as we have to have this done, even though the money may have to come from the road fund and reserves. My goal would be to try to reimburse him, well, not him, but the road fund reserve at some point down the line. But we got to get this fixed. If we keep kicking the can down the road, so to speak, we've used that term over and over and over.
Are we at the end of the road, Sheriff?
What's that?
Are we at the end of the road?
We're at the end of the road. Yeah. And I would hate to see, come August or something like that, we're still discussing this, and then we're into the rainy season, the snow season, and we can't get that because the winds come up and tower crews can't climb those towers in those situations. The last time we went down, Day Wireless came in, and they really brought some crews in quickly and got us back up, even though it took 2 months to get us back in order. And that's just trying to repair what we got. Getting that system put in, the robust system they want to put in and install, we're not going to have those issues, especially if the one tower goes down. It's going to be able to work our way around and have a redundant system to where we can communicate. That's imperative. We have to have communication.
Commissioner Boyce?
I hate to say it, but we could very well be in another natural disaster situation. Who knows when? I mean, 2 consecutive years, we never would have thought that was likely. The odds played out. How much time do you think you need? And I assume you're talking to Coos County, and I think they're somewhat in a similar situation.
I'm talking to Lake County.
Okay.
And that's what we're talking about, is leapfrogging. I don't
Will we give you enough time, us enough time to follow through with our research? And
there's only 2 things I want to do. Is I'd like to have a conversation with the Board of Commissioners there. They're supposed to call me this afternoon or tomorrow, and I would like to speak to at least one of these loan companies. I agree with you. I think we need to find funding for this immediately, and it should be probably through the road fund. But I'd also like to look at maybe some if they can give us a year of gap funding on this, that we could tap into the road fund and however we could structure that loan. There are several ways you could structure it. Sheriff, I need a few days. That's all I need. I don't need to kick this down the road.
Right now, we don't have a regular meeting scheduled for the 27th. Is that correct?
Yes,
Mr.
we do.
Miller?
We do have.
It's a workshop.
We have a meeting and a workshop, I believe.
Oh,
Oh, we can bring this right back next week. I'll
Thank
have
you.
everything I need by next week.
okay. That helps me.
Are you gonna need to ask Dave Wireless to have
No.
it come back?
No,
No,
Okay.
not from my point.
not if they're going to have us read another encyclopedia, okay?
Commissioner Gold.
Well done.
I just have one other question. This system, do you have any idea how long it will last?
40 years.
Calvin Amy with Day Wireless. That's a question I really can't answer, how long it would last. Microwave systems as old as yours is now, what, 15-ish years old. So you really want to return on investment anything above 10 years. That's a goal. Such an expense like this, you would want 15 to 20 years return on investment. That's my opinion.
And with proper maintenance, much longer.
Yeah, you're going to have so there are they're wear items, if you want to call them dishes. That's just an antenna. They wear over time, and that's what unfortunately the county is dealing with now. In addition to that, the county is dealing with an aged analog system. So we want to convert you over to a digital IP-based system for many good reasons. All right, some we talk about, some we haven't talked about. From a manufacturer standpoint, and Cameron may be better to speak to this than I am, the question is, how long are they going to support the piece of equipment that we're putting up? The 820G model is their newest radio. So I would expect, not speaking for Cambium, but I would expect at least that be supported for at least a solid 10 plus years, knowing it's their newest. Oftentimes when a manufacturer goes to end of life, they will give 7 years advance notice to the customers.
Okay.
So,
I have a question.
Ms. Melzer.
Sure, question. Are you able to give us numbers on what we should be setting aside every year to make sure we're not in this situation in 10 years?
yeah. Klamath County is a good example in my opinion. They set aside $50,000, I believe it is, a year.
Okay.
And they chewed up a good portion of that last year by replacing radios at their communication sites, not microwave. That's fairly new, but they're actual repeaters. So they will again spend next year an additional amount of funds. And actually, the Sheriff and I were talking about that to a degree. It's extremely wise, as you would imagine, to put aside a fund for general radio upgrades or maintenance. I think you would be surprised how few counties actually do it.
So
I
glad-
also, in my reading and studying up on this, I've learned that the digital circuitry and the way that this new stuff is manufactured is much more. You can count on it a lot stronger than the old analog.
It's more robust, yeah. It has its own built-in fail-safes. And of course, with the ring involved now, it's just that much more protection. Heaven forbid, a tower gets blown over, right? Well, now we go the opposite direction and still maintain connectivity, which again is the goal.
Commissioner Gold?
One last thing, I'm kind of piggyback on what Julie was saying about putting aside those entities that are using these towers. I think they should be having a little extra put in their bill so that we can put it in that replacement fund.
And we're not only going to look to do that, I think we're also going to look to add things to the towers, more lease space to the towers as well.
Okay.
And that should all, in my opinion, should all be dedicated to the replacement and maintenance fund for these towers. They're the lifeblood of our sheriff's department's deputies. I mean, this is important stuff.
And I think that's where we blew it in the past.
So what I'd like to do then is bring this back for the 27th for an action item and hopefully a vote on this for next week.
Just one quick comment.
Yes, sir.
Very glad, Director Smells, you asked that question, because the inventory for our strategic plan just keeps growing. So that's quite insightful. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next action item will be number 6, or I'm sorry, 6D. It's the courthouse reconstruction. Just very briefly, I've had several conversations with different people about our courthouse. There were some things that were supposed to be done in 2018 to get us on the list for either a major repair or replacement of our courthouse. The last actual inspection that was done through AOC was 2009, which we have that report. And I believe the courthouse was given a failing grade at that point. Since then, in my opinion, it is severely degraded. I've been up in Judge Margolis's office. I've been up in our district attorney's office. Mold in the walls and the ceilings, literally ceilings collapsing onto one of our judges. Our district attorney's office, you can literally take your fingers, and when you scrape down the walls of the concrete and brick, it literally falls, pieces of it fall off in your hand. That's how brittle it is. There's no earthquake bolts, no earthquake rods in that building. It was I think it was 56. It was built, which was, in my opinion, a very good year. But
we're going to stand you up next to that.
They did have failures in earthquakes. They didn't believe in earthquakes in this part of the country, and we are having them 2 or 3 a year right now off the coast. So I can't imagine a 5 or a 6 hitting on the coast, what it would do to that building. So I would like to move forward with not a repair of the courthouse. I think in this new inspection that we're going to get, we're going to find that the approximate new value of the courthouse is a 2.1 to a 2.2, which is an absolute replace, not repair. And we're going to look to replace the courthouse above the tsunami zone, and it's going to be something that's going to take some time. We also need to make sure we provide security for our judges, our juries, and all the other employees in that courthouse, a secure parking area, those kind of things, and an easier way for our sheriff's department to protect everyone in the building. So I'm going to look to move forward and replace the courthouse. We cannot now, because the 18 deadline was missed, we cannot get on the list through AOC funding until the spring of 2020. So that'll be the next time that we will have the opportunity. There is money out there for a courthouse. It is some matching funds, but there is money out there for a new complex of a courthouse. I'd like to look for a courthouse and a jail on one property, and see if we can get that done. My mom always used to say, aim for the stars, and if you hit the living room wall, at least you aimed high, boy. So
I made a try at it, Mr. Chair. Glad you're taking the lead on this. Very important.
Commissioner Gold.
I would suggest that we definitely put this in the strategic plan and possibly look for ways to start finding matching fund money. Also, the safety of the courthouse, that needs to be done, I would say, ASAP.
Well, we're going to hopefully move forward with that. I will be a big proponent of it. I am already working with AOC. I've had several conversations with them on this, and they are expecting us for the spring of 2020. Actually, it'll be February of 2020, I believe, that we will have everything reassessed and be on the list for a new courthouse. They've already told me it is a definite replace, not repair. So that's my hope as well. Motor pool update and sales discussion, action item 6E. If I could have Mr. Christensen step up.
I'll break.
I'm sorry?
I'll break.
Oh, you know what,
Can
you're
I
right.
ask a question?
Yes.
Don't we go an hour and a half without a break? Does it have to be an hour?
I guess we can do that.
Just briefly, I believe the break is for our staff who's hourly, and their breaks aren't based on how long our meeting is. It's when they start work, so it's every couple of hours. So it's not based on our meeting, Commissioner.
Well, he started at 8, yes.
Yeah,
2
okay.
hours. So we're going to take a 10-minute recess. It's 10:09. We'll be back at 10:20. On the record. Let's continue with
Back in January, Commissioner Pash asked me to look into our general service vehicles and their usage. And so what we did is we looked at in the last 6 months their mileage rates and everything. We saw 8 vehicles that weren't used very much. And so I did a report saying we should probably downsize 4 vehicles and also transfer 4 other vehicles into the motor pool from the district attorney office, from assessor's office, and also from juvenile services to try to get their mileage rates up. And we had a departmental head meeting, and it was determined that, yes, let's downsize 4 vehicles, but these other departments to maintain having their vehicles because they foresee their usage going way up with new staff. So we have a budget of $70,000 for the motor pool, $24,000 for the Veteran Services Department, and $20,000 for the Assessor's Department. And so we shopped around with governmental pricing with Ford, GM, and Dodge, and we came up with 2 vehicles that we would like to buy, 2 types of vehicles. We like to buy the Ford Escape SUV all-wheel drive, and also the Dodge Quad Cab 4x4 four-wheel drive. And we'd like to buy, and so the department heads decided that Veteran Services decided they wanted the Quad Cab four-wheel drive because of their need. The Assessor's Department decided they wanted the Ford Escape. And the motor pool decided to do 2 Quad Cab four-wheel drives and 1 Ford Escape all-wheel drive to their needs, with the thought that we would sell these vehicles in 3 years and recoup their cost because we were buying at governmental pricing and selling them, and in the future rotate our vehicles and have very limited cost and maintaining the motor pool.
And part of the thinking behind this is when we met, for the board's knowledge, you know, the motor pool maintenance fees, because we have several of the vehicles, I think, only had less than 1,000 miles on them in the last 6 months.
Yeah, or even less than 100.
So we decided, you know, this is not county dollars best spent. We'd rather take these vehicles that are now in 10 and 12 and 15 years old. Let's go ahead and auction them off because the actual annual maintenance on these vehicles is more than their value. So we're going to move to get rid of these through a public auction probably. And by purchasing the new vehicles at the government pricing like Mr. Christensen talked about, they come with a full 3-year, 36,000 mile warranty. Having some experience in cars and auto dealerships and pricing, I believe we can sell these vehicles in 2.5 to 3 years while they're still on warranty, which gives a new buyer a great comfort to have a little bit of a warranty left on the vehicle when they buy it. And I believe our motor pool expenses will be at an almost break even because of the pricing we can buy these for and then resale at retail. And our maintenance fees are basically negligible other than maybe tires and oil changes. I believe that the motor pool, the cost of our motor pool will greatly decrease over the years if we manage it properly.
The road department feels the same, and if we were to get approval to make these 5 purchases, it would take 8 to 12 weeks for them to arrive.
Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you. You put a lot of work into this, and I think I hear a commitment to eliminate some unnecessary vehicles,
yes,
maybe a rather large number, and that's been an issue ever since I got here, and it is an issue with the citizens, so to see progress is really good to see. Now, I worked on the fleet, the company, what's the name of it?
Enterprise.
Thank you. Got it. I drew a blank.
They actually gave us some great ideas.
Well, yeah, that's okay. You know, they come. I wouldn't have pursued that except that they come highly recommended through both Coos and Jackson counties. I see your time, and your time is very valuable, so it sounds like it's paid off. You know, sometimes I give you a bad time about we've got you spread pretty thin. But I think you've done some good work here, and I'm anxious to see the follow through. Looks like you're going to take my 13-year-old Taurus, and I think we got our money's worth out of that, Mr. Chair.
The other thing we're doing is some of the departments, Mr. Christensen and I have talked about this along with Ms. Schmelzer. Some of the departments are going to have to share vehicles now. It's just not going to be, everybody's got vehicles. I'm actually going to work with Mr. Colin in the assessor's office. If our vehicles are gone, rather than use my personal vehicle and charge the county mileage, I'll ask him if I can borrow his vehicle. And that way we're using these vehicles to a better extent than we have in the past. And it's getting more bang for our buck for our motor pool, and also decreasing it, not having so many vehicles in the motor pool. So, Commissioner Gold?
Just one question. How much are these 4 cars going to cost?
Oh, we went over budget, $600?
Yes.
Okay, so that's within the budget.
Yes, absolutely. I think we were
That's my
$500 or
bottom line.
$600 over budget.
Okay, well, that's negligible.
And actually, the assessor's vehicle will also have a radio in it for security reasons. If he's out on a call, that he can call for backup if he needs it.
So you probably didn't figure in the amount you could auction all those old cars off?
It's going to be negligible.
Okay, well, I'm just thinking that could take care of the $600.
Oh, it'll absolutely take care of it.
That's all I'm saying.
I'm guessing each one of these vehicles is going to be $1,000 or less as their value. The book value on them is $500 to $600.
Oh, okay.
But because of the low mileage and good tires, they'll probably go a few $100s over book value. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just one quick comment, I'm sorry. Are you prepared to explain to the public, I mean, I'm not disputing this, but why the VSO would need a 4-wheel drive? I mean, I have no difficulty with that, but some citizens may say, what is the reason for that?
Resale value only.
Good for you, thank you.
The difference of a 2-wheel drive and a 4-wheel drive is only $2,500 in our purchasing. Resale value, 4-wheel drives sell like this. 2-wheel drives are a tough sell in this area. Nobody wants a 2-wheel drive vehicle. They all want 4-wheel drives. So we thought when we get up to resale, whether it be through auction or private sale, that the resale value of the vehicle would be more, and we could move it a lot quicker and easier.
Good job, thank you. Thank you, Roadmaster Christensen. Did you have some?
I was just going to say, so we probably want to just go ahead and authorize that purchase. I mean, it is budgeted, but
Yes.
I think the other question was what we do with the other vehicles. Do we sell them outright? Do we sell them at auction? And that's something we need direction on.
I'd like to talk a little bit more with Mr. Christensen about that, because there are a couple of different ways to do that, and I know I don't want anyone out there to think that I'm going to do anything in personal gain. Maybe I should completely recuse myself from any decision made on that, but there are some different ways to sell through auction rather than just a bid on it and die. So it might do better to put them out here privately and advertise them. You'd probably get more money for them, but that's just my thought.
Well, perhaps the board could just give direction, take action and give direction that it be between Mr. Christensen and his liaison to figure out how to get rid of the vehicles that we don't need.
Commissioner Boyce?
Sorry, just maybe clarification, question more. Does this tie into our new travel policy and an update on that, even kind of indirectly, do you think, Director Schmidt?
No, but we do have the travel policy on the agenda for next week.
Thank you, okay. Appreciate that, that's
All right, so why don't we do this? Why don't we, let me make a motion that we move forward with the purchase of these vehicles and also direct Mr. Christensen to make the final decision. I'd like to talk with you about it, but it is your decision. And maybe if you'd like to pair that with Ms. Schmelzer, I think I need to keep an arm's length from this, only because I do have an Oregon dealer's license, so I need to keep an arm's distance from this.
Understood. Any advice, appreciate it, but our current process and past process has been to put them on public surplus, and we sell them through public surplus, so.
Commissioner Gold?
Is there some sort of a law that tells us what we have to do with surplus property, Council?
We can dispose of it to a not-for-profit or another government without compensation, or we can dispose of it through commercially reasonable means including but not limited to the state auction, website and those kind of things. So commercially reasonable means is a general rule of thumb.
And under state Oregon DMV laws, they have to be offered to the public at large fairly.
Yeah, and I think the state auction services does that. Is
No, I'm just saying,
okay.
as long as the DMV requires that they be offered to the public at large, not to a group. In other words, it can't be a closed auction, it has to be an open auction setting. Which
I
the
just
state-
want to be sure that we get the most money out of those cars that we can.
Right, are you-
That's my only concern.
Are you talking about like a salvage auction where you have to have a particular dealer's license to buy a piece of salvage, or
No,
something?
no, I'm
Okay,
talking about
all right.
if something is auctioned, anytime something is auctioned through a public entity like the
Yeah,
county,
yeah.
it has to be auctioned to
Yep.
anyone in the public should have the right
Yeah.
to buy that vehicle,
No, I agree.
not a limited group.
Yep.
Commissioner Boyce?
Just so the public knows, correct me if I'm wrong, Director Smelser would know, does that money go to the taxing district? Doesn't necessarily come back to the budgets. Is that correct?
No, that's
No.
incorrect.
General
Right back
fund.
to the general fund.
Because it's not land,
Purchased from the
because it's a
general
big
fund.
Yeah.
It was
Glad I'm wrong on
right.
that. Thank
So
you.
am I. All right, so I made that motion that we move forward to purchase these vehicles and authorize Mr. Christensen, after collaborating with Ms. Schmelzer, to sell the vehicles that we've discussed previously, and get her done.
It's a good day. Second the motion, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion? Roll.
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Aye.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Great, thank you.
All right, so we are down to, I see or Dr. Williams here, and I know he had asked me to do a comment card for this morning. I didn't see you here, so I didn't fill one out. So if you would like to, I know your time is valuable as well. If you'd like to have your comments for the commission.
First of all, for those who don't know me, I'm Dr. Williams. I've been a physician in Curry County for 47 years now. I practiced pretty much the majority of my first 20 years in Brookings and the Brookings Harbor area. And I would like to comment basically about Sue Gold's letter that she sent to the governor, and it had a letterhead of the Curry County Commissioners on it, and I'm here to find out if her letter represents the sentiments of the entire Curry County Commissioner. I'm here to represent myself, no one else. I'm not representing the hospital, I'm not representing the board, hospital administration, but I do have a few comments. Within that letter, which I understand was in the paper today, that letter specifically stated that, I'm reading from the letter, I am very concerned about the executive initiative that proposes a standalone emergency room be opened in Brookings as soon as possible for the following reasons. 1, Oregon statutes require the patients be transported by ambulance to the nearest ER, which would be in Brookings. Those patients would then have to be transported to Curry General Hospital, Sutter Coast, or another hospital that could meet the needs of the hospital, of the patient. The patient would be best served if they went directly to Sutter Coast Emergency Room so they would not have to be transported twice. And then it has been documented that CMS frowns on standalone emergency rooms because there are significant increases in cost and patient risk. Increases in health insurance is just one example. And the reason I'm here is that I don't think Sue Gold realizes how wrong that is. For example, first of all, what is an emergency room? And when you're talking about transfers, 98% of people treated in emergency rooms aren't transferred anywhere. If there's an emergency room in Brookings, that 93%, I'm sorry, 93% come in they're treated. They're treated for things like asthma, lacerations, dehydration, abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, and a multitude of other things, severe poison oak, and then they're treated and released. And so by her recommending that there not be, or an emergency room be delayed, she's harming 93% of patients. 7% of patients are actually admitted to a hospital, and that would be either Curry General or Sutter. Of that 7%, 2 to 3% are actual drastic emergencies. And what happens in the two most common drastic emergencies would be examples, a heart attack or a stroke. If you have an emergency room in Brookings, you can treat those with something called thrombolytic agents. And time is of the essence. Not to drive to Crescent City, not to drive to Gold Beach, but go to the emergency room in Brookings and get those things treated, and then you can be transported from Brookings directly to, most likely, Medford to get that acute MI or your strokes treated. And so in a lot of ways, I'd like to compliment the hospital board. I think they do a really good job. I think the hospital board, with the administration, has done things in a logical, economically feasible way in Brookings. For example, they built over a $20 million healthcare facility there, the Curry Medical Center. And then they built, and then they went on to do a urgent care. And urgent care is more like an outpatient clinic, no different than the clinic that I have here in Gold Beach. Anyone can walk in and anyone can get treated, but they don't treat acute MIs, strokes. You have to be in an emergency room for that. I feel like I represent the best interest of my Brookings Harbor patients when I say that an emergency room is badly needed, because I want my Brookings Harbor people to be able to go to an emergency room. Now, the emergency room is really close on the cusp of being developed by Curry Health Network. And I think any obstruction to that, which I think Sue Gold is doing, for whether it's political interests or whatever those interests are. Now, the future in the Brookings Harbor should be developed in an economically feasible way. So we went from Curry Medical Center to urgent care, now to an emergency room, and the future may also bring further development, inpatient beds, in a logical manner. And I do feel that the hospital, when the road went out, that hurt everybody. And I mean, that's not a common occurrence. I've been here since 1972, and when Hooskanogin went out completely and we had to go Carpenterville, that's the first time that's happened. Hooskanogin has been a problem forever. When I came here in 72, one of my patients was an engineer, and I said, "What are you up to?" And he said, "Well, I'm working for the Department of ODOT to develop a solution for Hooskanogin." And that solution then, by the way, was to build a bridge over it. But they keep patching it. I think we also live in an area where being transported and transferred is not an unusual event. We will never have cardiac surgery here. We will never have neurosurgery here. Neither will Crescent City. Neither will Bandon. Like I said, I am primarily here representing myself and what I feel is the best interest of the Brookings Harbor people. And right now, there's a group that she is involved with, in my opinion, that is very counterproductive, divisive, and splitting and trying to continue with splitting the county. And And the county is, we are Curry County, we are Oregon, and I call it the healthcare wagon. It should be all pulling in the same direction by working with each other. And that's not happening, and I certainly hope that the hospital board isn't dissuaded by any of this negativity, because the hospital board writes the governor for emergency funds. Sue Gold writes them to not do it.
I appreciate it.
It's a disservice to Brookings Harbor. That's
Can
all
we
I
keep
have.
Commissioner Gold?
Can we keep him for questions?
Yes, could you please stay there for questioning, please?
Sure.
Commissioner Gold?
Let me just bring some comments up. CMS, who's Medicare, frowns on emergency rooms, all of standalone emergency rooms. All of California is not able to do that. And the reason they frown on this is because it's more patient cost and more patient risk. And we have this in writing.
Sue, Mr. Milliman was part of a study in the grant that showed an emergency room would actually save 10 lives in Brookings. Now, that may not be important to you, but that's very, very important. And it's very important that the morbidity goes down. When people go to that emergency room in Brookings and they get thrombolytics for strokes and heart attacks, not only is their life saved, but their morbidity is down. They don't have problems later from congestive heart failure from a heart being destroyed. You know, you can quote all these little things, and to me, what's most important is what's most important now for the Brookings Harbor people. Now, I know that you're pushing for a hospital. Any hospital in Brookings would have an ER. And an emergency...
Exactly.
And so why are you trying to stop an emergency room
It's
now?
kind of putting the cart before the horse. And let me just say this, the emergency room that's being proposed will have no observation beds. Let me give you one example of where an emergency room only would cause problems. Suppose someone had an acute appendicitis. You go in there and you have to be transported. That's the only way that you could have the surgery that you need. They would be better off just going straight to Sutter, straight shot, or straight to Curry General.
In your letter, you put straight to Sutter. I believe you're what's called a Curry County Commissioner, not a Del Norte County Commissioner.
I think we need to do what is in the best interest of the people of South Curry or all of Curry. We're not here
in the best
just...
interest of the people of South Curry, in my opinion, Curry General has recruited one of the finest general surgeons you can find, one of the finest orthopedic surgeons that you can find, one of the finest urologic. I have 35% of my practice comes from Brookings Harbor. And during Hooskanogin, I had 88, 90-year-old people driving the detour up here to see me because they want to come up here.
And I'm not disputing that. I think what you did as far as coming up with a shuttle service to go back and forth is great. That's fine. But I don't want to limit people's choices. And Oregon statutes does say that people have to go to the closest ER.
Well, closest ER, if you eventually get beds in the hospital, will be Brookings ER.
And I think that's great. I have no problem with that. I am advocating for a satellite critical access hospital. That's what I'm advocating for.
What you're advocating for is to stop the emergency room now or to slow it down. And what you're advocating for may not be possible and it may not be economically feasible, but it may delay the emergency room, what you're advocating for, over the next year or two, and that should not happen. That's criminal.
So let me say this. One of my concerns on this, and Ms. Schmelzer, don't we have something scheduled in the first week of April for the hospital to come in and present to us?
Right.
Okay, so I think it would be great at that point that we can air out a lot of this and we can get the facts from our hospital and exactly what's going on. My biggest concern on this is when I saw this, I actually saw it on Facebook, and that was, Ms. Gold, that you wrote the governor a letter on county letterhead.
I am a county commissioner. I did not put any of your signatures or any of your names on that letter.
In other words, my county letterhead, I have a letterhead. It doesn't say Board of Commissioners. It says Christopher Pash, Curry County Commissioner under it. It doesn't say the Board of Commissioners. And My only problem with what you sent to the governor was it made it seem like you might be speaking for the Board of Commissioners, and I'm hopeful that that is not what you intended.
No, that is not what I intended at all.
Well, I will let
And
this
I have
board
been
know.
keeping
Excuse
this
me,
board
excuse me.
updated.
I will let this board know at this time that I have since written the governor a letter explaining to her my disdain as to the way that I felt the intent of this letter was, and that I fully support getting an ER open, because I have had uncles. I've had a dear friend of mine had a stroke, and the doctors, when we walked into the emergency room after, said if he hadn't gotten here in 5 minutes that we could administer these drugs to him, he'd either be a vegetable peeing on himself for the rest of his life, or he would have died. So the importance of an emergency room and emergency care, I think this would be a great benefit to Curry County and the Brookings Harbor area, and to have the availability of a 24-hour, fully staffed emergency room for emergencies, and at a minimum, like you said, Dr. Williams, that you can at least stabilize and then transport to where the appropriate services are, to me is a win-win-win for Curry County. Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at the letterhead, and it says Curry County Board of Commissioners. So I think it's reasonable to assume that most people would interpret that as a collective board letter. Dr. Williams, I could listen to you all day because it's incredibly educational, informative. Your credibility as a doctor is without question. But to hear you articulate what you just suggested, and the friends I know you have in Brookings, the people that depend on you from South County, the entire county, and that reputation you have, the heart you have to watch this whole process, old hospital to new hospital. I've personally witnessed myself, you, the board, all of them imperfect, just like everybody sitting up here, work incredibly hard to pull this county together on this issue, because down deep, you know, it is the best thing for this county, the citizens, putting the people first. Is that to suggest that Curry General doesn't still have difficulties? All hospitals do, in my very strong opinion. To have this go to the governor, I mean, I'm still processing. I think that we all represent, through our friendships and people we know well in Brookings, it is a divided issue, but I think far more people are counting on this emergency room. And I'll conclude with this, and the sooner the better. There will be people, there have been people that have died without that emergency facility. Putting the cart before the horse, it's as clear as can be, I think, to most people in this county. You get an emergency room, you get it properly staffed, you get it properly equipped, you support it, you encourage people to use it, to understand what we have available, and then perhaps you can go to another small hospital, but not yet. An additional hospital in Brookings, in my view, will put Sutter on the verge of going out of business, could do the same for Curry General. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And one more thing I'd like to just comment on as well for the record. We live in rural Oregon. I think I've been, and you've been my doctor since I've been here, even though I haven't spoken to you very much in the last year or so because I haven't needed you. But I've been in a couple of incidents that I was taken to the hospital emergency, and you had me airlifted out to one time Springfield, one time to Medford, one time to Eugene because of different things that had happened to me. So, you know, we live in a place that we don't have specialized services like heart surgeons, like brain surgeons, those kind of things, and we're going to have to be lifted out anyway. So to have another facility in this county, in a mid-sized city like Brookings Harbor, that can offer services, immediate services to people and stabilize them before they're transported, to me, again, is a win-win. Commissioner Gold, I'll give you your final on this.
Okay, let me just say this. There has been no feasibility study done on this issue, how it would affect Sutter, how it would affect the county. Also, there are no observation beds that are going to be in that facility, according to your CEO. I just think it's pushing it too fast, to be honest with you.
A
That's my-
feasibility.
You don't need a feasibility study
No.
to tell us that there's an urgent need
Oh,
for
boy.
an emergency room.
And you don't need a
What
feasibility
you're
study.
saying in the future, will be considered by the hospital, I'm sure.
And we don't need a feasibility study to know if we put another hospital in Brookings Harbor, it will not only, it'll submarine all 3 hospitals, because they'll probably all fail, because none of them will be able to draw enough resources to pay for themselves if they're good service.
Can I have one final comment, if I promise to make it short, sir? No, okay. A feasibility study, that's bureaucracy behind the cloak of, it's all about the rules. It's not about the goals. It's not about common sense. Quite often that's the case. I think that's exactly what we're looking at here. Thank you again, Dr. Williams.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next, we are going to move on to F. Action item, grant writer professional services discussion. Ms. Schmelzer, I do have a comment card from Mr. Barnes. Would you like to step up, sir? After? Okay.
So we've been talking about different things such as rebuilding the courthouse and jail, and RFPs or strategic plans and things of this nature, highway projects, etc. And what we don't have is a grant writer or someone to provide professional services. So I want the board to have a discussion to see whether they feel there's value in actually having a grant writer or a professional services account that we can pay for grant writers or people such as Steve Byerlin, who's doing all that work, to see if there's a way to pay for those people. I do think that sometimes you have to spend the money to make the money. And a lot of grant writers will just work off of an admin fee from the money that we're receiving. Some of them will require a certain percentage. But I do think we need to start thinking about whether that's something we want to budget for in the coming year, or even now to have there is no line item for such services right now in our account. So it is something that most counties do have. They do have, try to make sure that there is money set aside in case they need somebody to come in and provide consulting services or grant writing or something.
I thought we had a professional services account because we've hired outside counsel.
That
Is Ms. Colstrom listening? Could she come in, please?
That is in the council's budget
Okay.
that he has for legal counsel.
And we also have an economic development director who, part of their job description is to apply for grants and seek out grants.
Right.
Economic development related grants. Yes.
But what I can see with that, though, is being just overburdened with so much work that you're not going to get anything done. Anyone that is a grant writer, and I've never written a grant. Well, actually, I've assisted on a couple of grants, but I wasn't the writer. It's a lot of work. I know somebody that they told me they take care of 5 grants, and they say it's a full-time job administering those grants and keeping up with the applications for the new grants. So if we could find somebody that may look to be a grant writer for the county, because I am going to go after every grant I can find, and someone that would be willing to work on an administrative portion of that grant, I would be all for that. Commissioner Gold?
My concern is a lot of times grant writers are, their fee is based on a commission based on whether they get the grant or not. And I think that would probably be the best way for the county to go forward, simply because we don't have the funds. But another problem in the past has been commissioners have applied for grants and gotten those grants, and then what happens is it's like a revolving door with the commissioners coming and going and administering the grants. I can think of one, the grant down in Brookings for the day center for the kids. Almost didn't make it, simply because of the administration of that grant. So I think whatever we do, we need to be very careful and with what goes on.
And here again, back to Council Huddle's point, we have Summer Matheson now on staff, and to have her be the administrator over the grant, or let's put it the way, someone to oversee and manage the grants of the grant writer, to make sure that everything is being followed up on. If you get a new commission in, you know, that if there's a liaison to that she makes sure that that new person is put in that direction. I think if they're managed properly, if you've got good people in place to manage the grants that you get and the people that oversee them to make sure that they're doing their job, it is well worth the money and the effort for this county to proceed with. Commissioner Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm interpreting what you're saying, that you are in favor of an additional person to add to our staff on the basis of it figures for pay, good investment. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes, but I would like to lean toward not a salaried position. This would be an administrative a portion of the administrative part of the grant.
My understanding is correct, and I agree. Thank you.
Ms. Melcher.
My, what you typically see is it's a third party where you're contracting with a professional grant writer or for somebody for professional services.
Right.
Somebody that if they don't get that grant, their contract isn't renewed, versus a staff person who is there regardless whether they're getting the grants or not.
Exactly. So that's
More
what I'd like to do.
accountability.
Professional services is more what I'm looking for.
I agree with that.
So we wouldn't even need any budget money for that.
I sort of do have a question.
You
You mentioned, if I could,
Sure.
you mentioned, so outside county counsel, my assistant county counsel is a contracted position, and it's in our budget as a line item. Is there not a line item in the Board of Commissioners office for professional services or anything like that, where they can just contract for professional services such as these?
You could put a line item in the BOC office or the commissioners themselves or in non-departmental.
Doesn't such a line item already exist, though? That was a question. I thought
Not
it
for
did.
this, no. I
Well,
mean,
well, it doesn't have to be specifically for grant writing. Couldn't it be
well,
just for?
usually when professional services have a line item, they're for a specific
I
purpose.
see. Okay.
So I don't know off the top of my head if there's professional services, general services in the BOC office. There was for the interim commissioner, or the interim administrator, Mr. Hitt, because that was a professional service, not a payroll.
So if we were to put in a grant writer or if we add Mr. Byerland into a professional services, or if we hired an engineer to look at, re-engineering something in the county, we would have to each time individually enter that as a professional service line in our budget? Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, what I'm saying is that when you have things that you're planning on doing, you should put it in the budget at budget time, budget for it, and then it will have a line item for that particular item.
Counsel?
Well, thanks. I have pulled up the budget. I'm not the expert on the budget, but I am looking at, and this is I think the general services part, non-departmental, and it has several professional services line items in there already. This is page 33 of the budget. It says professional services legal. So the general services had a separate professional services legal other than county counsel. It has a professional services general in the amount of $20,000. Has professional services Brant Media, where we've called it out specifically. They're an example of professional services. So, so yeah, I mean, if you wanted to put it in the budget, you could and have it there. I'm sorry, I just kind of give an example. They do exist. These kind of things do exist.
And I understand what you're saying now. There is a line for professional services, and you just have to add whatever you're going to add into that budget line and plan for it.
Like the $20,000 under the non-departmental, that's for, I think that's one was a actual placeholder. When things come up during the year and you need professional services for it, that's where you would find that money. Sometimes we do put placeholders because things come up, and but the kind of things that you're talking about should be planned for, and that therefore they should be put into the budget and say, we are going to get a grant writer. It shouldn't be something that's a last minute, let's do it right now kind of thing. It should be something that's planned for.
Okay. Well, and perhaps let's go ahead and make a motion to go ahead and move forward with that. And I understand that, you know, for me personally, I would like to see that the grant writer work off the administrative part of it for the moment, and if we can change that down the road, then that would be fine. Commissioner Boyce?
Would that just be for the first year, though?
Well, that would be, yeah.
Well, this is looking at, do we agree that this is the type of service that we want to start budgeting for? Is this something that we want to do?
Okay.
Yes, here.
Okay, so I'm guessing at this point, Mr. Barnes, you'd like to make your comments.
I have a question.
Yes.
So during the audits that we've had since I've been here, we've had fairly bad comments on our grants. And I did tell that the auditors that we would have a grant administrator, and I was actually named the grant administrator, and now it seems to me that you're going to assign that to somebody else.
Well, go ahead, Ms. Melzer.
That was a comment by a commissioner, and council did comment that that's in Summer Madison's job description. I want to clarify, Summer Madison's job description is for economic development related grants. Just like right now, the roadmaster is doing his own grants. What we're talking about here is somebody to come out for projects such as a new courthouse and new jail. We don't have the staff capacity to go after millions of dollars of grants. So we either forego that.
Well, I just wanted to let the board
You're the
know
administrator.
that I do, you know, different departments have different grants, and like district attorney has all those VOCA grants and everything. But I oversee them, and I work with the people who are claiming and doing the reporting on those grants to make sure that they're all done correctly and make sure that it's all done. Because when I came here, nobody was overseeing, and everybody was just doing their own thing, and it was quite a mess, and I just want to make sure that we don't go backwards.
And that's exactly what I was talking about with Ms. Matheson, is to have a grant writer and an administrator of the grant, and then to have someone like you overseeing it, is what my mention of Summer Matheson was. So if you are in that position, I think you're the perfect person to do it, because you have your fingers on the pulse of the budget of this county.
And I have all of the financial reports that are required that they need, so.
Okay. If you wouldn't mind those, don't leave. Mr. Barnes.
Good morning, David Barnes.
Morning.
I want to point out something. I saw on the agenda that this is listed for the possibility of paying somebody up to $50,000 to do this. And I just want to remind this board that if you do this now, as of this morning, that'll be $220,000 worth of new spending that you've committed to this year. That's working out to about 20 grand a week for the 10 weeks you've been in office. But before you hire someone, I really want you to reconsider. Last year you appointed a Citizens Revenue Task Force, and you had a lot of people come together, and they did a lot of work really quickly and brought this board back to TLT tax proposal. These people did this for free because, you know, they're part of the neighborhood and they have an expertise. I've read some of the resumes that people have submitted to various volunteer bodies, and I've talked to a lot of people around town. I myself, in the 3 years I've been here, I've gotten 4 grants from ODFW for things over at Indian Creek Hatchery. I know other people in town who also write grants for different things, homeless and other things. You know, before you go and commit to spending money on somebody, how about if you were to think about creating a grant writing board? You know, I would volunteer for it. I'm sure other people would. You know, you can, without knowing what you want to go out and apply for, I think it is kind of premature to hire somebody. And even then, if you're going to hire, if we already have an administrator on staff, a grant administrator doing this stuff, if you need someone to write it, you know, I'd prefer you just try volunteers first. You know, there's nothing that's definitive that has to be done today by a deadline. I'd really like you to put this out there and see if you, before you commit to hiring a professional, see if some of the professionals who live here would be willing to donate their time to do this for the county.
And I think that's wise counsel. Again, I want you to understand that I was not advocating for hiring someone. I was more advocating to get a grant writer, and they may receive a part of the administrative fee of the grant, not paying them a salaried position. So that's
still money out of our pockets at the end of the day.
It is, but you're going to pay administrative fees no matter how you slice it up. Mr. Huddle.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. If I could just follow up on a point Mr. Barnes was making about volunteer grant writing committee. Some places need qualified people to even submit the grants. One example, the grant we're working on right now, the Brookings Head Start, we actually have an outside individual administering that grant because under this federal grant program, we are not on their list of qualified people to administer the grant. The worst part about that is then we don't get an administrative cut on that grant, but nevertheless, Louise and I every month process paperwork. Brenda and I are doing the contracting work on it. We just met the contractors on the walkthrough on the property. All of these things we're doing without receiving any money from the grant for it. So it's not a given that we would receive funds for our work on these grants. I think it's an in-kind contribution that we're doing to a worthy project. But also for Mr. Barnes, some of these granting agencies, grant awarding agencies, require a particular qualified person to apply for a grant. So again, if the citizen committee just wants to go find grants and then recommend we pursue them, that may be an option. That's just some experience that I've seen in our grants since I've been here. So we also didn't get any money from administering the airport grants, did we, Louise? No. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so.
Commissioner Boyce?
Okay.
Commissioner Boyce?
Nothing, thank you.
Oh, I thought I saw your hand up. So again, I just want to clarify that I'm not out here looking to hire someone, and I understand administrative fees are still out of pocket expense. Mm-hmm. I would be open to looking to put together a grant writing a group of people that'd like to volunteer to write grants, and if we have a particular grant that requires, like Council Huddle just said, a specific qualification or certification, then if we can't find that, then we look to hire an outside source to do that. I'm wide open for that.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, before on a second point, completely off topic, but I've seen in the past Commissioner Brock Smith did it, Commissioner Huxley did it, I've seen Commissioner Boyce do it, and I've seen Commissioner Gold do it. Perhaps you should have just a topic at your next meeting about what is the standard for professional communications that leave this building in your names, and come up with a standard. You said you have your own letterhead that doesn't say Board of Commissioners, but it says Commissioner Pash. Perhaps you should have something standardized for everybody to use on that so that there is no mistake going forward.
I thought we did.
Mr. Christensen?
One of the big things with applying for grants is having matching funds.
Right.
A lot of grants require that match. And we were awarded 2 grants, about $2 million each, and that's in excess of $400,000 of matching funds we have to put forward in order to receive the $4 million. So that's something you really have to budget as well.
Right. Okay.
I
Mr.
just
Belzer.
Yeah, I just want to add, we've been focusing on the grant writer aspect of this conversation. It's professional services in general. So it would cover grant writing, professional services. I'm just asking that we consider, Mr. Byerlin is a really good example. He went to Washington, he's lobbying, he's going to all the counties, he's...
Just in the last week and a half, he's been in Salem testifying. He's been in Jackson County. He's going back to Jackson County tomorrow morning with me. He's met with ODOT. He's met with ODF and W. He's met with countless people, and I agree. We need to do something for professional services for him.
And again, my review of the budget, we have a line item for that. It had budgeted 20,000. It was general professional services, which I think a person like Byerland would come under, and it may just need to be some kind of a budget adjustment for the next 3 or 4 months of this year, and then when you get to next year, do it that way. So
Right.
I think there's already a line item for it.
And that's what I'd like to make sure of. And for Ms. Colstrom, I'd just like to let you know that I have spoken with him, and he would submit exactly through his company, you know, how he wants it done. But I would like this board to consider some sort of severance for him for his professional services over the last year that he has put in. I can't even count how many hours. I asked him a week or so ago how many hours, and he couldn't even fathom how many hours. I also want to give a quick update on that. We received another letter from ODF&W the other day, fully complying with or agreeing with everything that Mr. Byerland has said in his letters, right down to willing to go to the fight with us against the Corps of Engineers. So I would like to look for this board to, I'll make a motion that we add in an item into our professional services for Mr. Byerland's company, and that he receive compensation. I don't know, I hate to embarrass him with the number, but let's say for $3,000 compensation for his services. And I will say that I've also spoken with Jackson County Commissioners about this, and Josephine County Commissioners, and if we are going to have a professional services for him, because we expect this issue that he's working on to be a continuing issue for at least another year, they will contribute to that. So that's a big plus from those commissioners. I don't have anything in writing on that. I've just got a kind of a verbal okay. We're going to maybe press that issue a little harder tomorrow in Jackson County. Ms. Colstrom?
If you do not know the exact number, I would not recommend making a motion to pay that exact number.
Okay.
I was just going to offer, yeah, I think we need to table this until we actually go ahead, get the invoices, and I think we want to, I'm assuming we want to target it specific to the Rogue River steelhead salmon and trout enhancement program. And
well, it's the spring salmon, not steelhead.
It's all the above.
Well, yeah, it is all the above, yeah.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Well, thanks. Just a follow-up. I was, in response to an email, I was going to draft up a personal services contract. Then you could actually have a contract before you with some numbers, and I was going to talk to Mr. Byerland about that, and then we could bring it to the board for approval of an actual contract, if that's okay.
What he was going to do is get me an hours schedule or an hours scale. Believe it or not, he's willing to do this for $55 an hour, plus travel expenses, which would be reasonable. So I think for professional services that he has, working in the state legislative and all that he has done over the years, $55 is a steal. But I guess we can go further and ask him for his hours schedule on that.
I'll be working to bring something back for the board.
But I will say he's not looking for compensation for all the work he's done in the last year on this. He's looking basically to offset some of his expenses. So the number he's looking for up front right now would be nowhere near what his value is.
Okay.
I agree with everything you just said. I was not aware, however, that we were doing or considering anything beyond actual expenses and receipts from a point A to a certain time forward. So I think we need more time on this, and so I'm not ready to vote today because I don't want to put him in a tough position either.
Well, can you expound on what do you mean?
I just thought we were looking at, I've not had really comprehensive discussions with him because he's been very busy and I've been very busy, and he's very, very focused. I thought we were talking about carrying his actual expenses, travel, phone, pretty basic, pretty simple. I'm not opposed to looking at compensation beyond that, but I just was not aware, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Gold?
I just have one comment. It was kind of my understanding that Mr. Byerland did this on his own. We did not contract him to do it, and so I kind of have a problem with paying someone for something that we had not contracted previous to him doing this. That would kind of set a precedent. There's lots of volunteers in this county that do all kinds of things to improve the financial stability and so forth of the county. And so are we going to look at everybody and say, hey, like Mr. Barnes has done so, we need to pay him now or whatever? So that's what bothers me. If we set up a contract going forward, that's a little bit different than looking at past work that was entirely, in my opinion, voluntary.
Well, I can appreciate those comments. I will say I think in the last month or so, with him coming forward with the letter of no confidence, all the work that was done on that, actually that's been about 2 months now, just since the beginning of the year. To be very frank, the Corps of Engineers they laughed at us when he first presented it. They laughed at us. All of a sudden, we heard a week later that they were going to send some engineers out to the hatchery to prove us wrong, and a separate engineer group went out there and found $12 million worth of damage to this hatchery. Everything that he has presented in paperwork and failures in contracts has been verified by everyone, and I think you're right that he was not contracted through the county, but I will say it would be my hope that this board, along with the other boards involved in this, would do a good faith gesture to the amount of work that he's put in on this, like I said, of a minimal amount to support his efforts on this and his continuing efforts on this. Like I said, in the last week, he's been in 3 parts of this county testifying in front of the House and in front of other commissions. Mr. Boyce?
Well said. Maybe we could approach it this way. You mentioned the other counties, and in addition to the work you've done on this, aside from Mr. Byerlin, you know, motivated by, you know, the work and the accomplishments he's had, let's see what happens with the other counties. Let's see what kind of receipts and expenses we're talking about. And I think, to your point, we've got an opportunity here. I'd be very surprised if the other counties didn't join us in splitting this cost and seeing where this goes in the future. There's the potential for a very big recompensation to the counties on this, and so you know, we might want to just move a little slow on this, but I think we're basically on the same page. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think for everyone out there that doesn't realize that might be watching this, when, you know, this is something that the Corps of Engineers, when the Cold Rivers hatchery was built, promised in contractual law that they promised to do on an annual basis, was to bring back so many fish every year to the hatchery. And to my knowledge, they've never done that, and they've never come close. Not only that, they never addressed the gravel losses for the spawning grounds in the river that we've lost, the temperature changes in the river. There are 10 or 12 different items on this that the ODF&W has now agreed with every facet of this investigation, and we are now ready to face the Corps of Engineers with this. Our congressmen in Washington, along with our state senators, were all handed packages on this and accepted them with a smile. I will say Mr. DeFazio told me we do not want to sue the Corps of Engineers. I'm not looking to sue the Corps of Engineers right now. We're looking to send them a bill of about $90 million for the habitat loss for salmon, and an additional bill for the damage that they've done to the tourism and economics development in this county and our surrounding counties. So if we'd like to then...
That's a bargain, by the way.
Let's table this for next week if we can. We'll bring this back up, and that'll give Mr. Byerlin a chance to submit a dollar amount to this commission that we can look at and add in as a professional service, and perhaps that'll satisfy Commissioner Gold as to his services and what he's going to bill us for that.
Yeah, and I'm not concerned with the services he's done in the past. That was, in my opinion, totally voluntary. But maybe he can contract for services going forward. I think that sets a much better precedent.
All right, so we're going to just stand down on that for now. I guess we've got enough time right now to do our... we've got our sheriff sitting here twiddling his thumbs, and I hate to do that. Can we change our executive session to now, and then we can do director's report and commissioner's update after the executive session? I just don't want to see our sheriff sitting here for another, by the time we're done with all of our updates and all that, then it's going to be lunchtime, and now you got to come back after lunch. I just don't want to do that. So
Fine with me.
is that
So
fine?
I'm prepared.
Okay.
I'm prepared.
So at this time, what we're going to do is call a recess to this meeting, and we will enter into executive session.
And you can give the list of the exec session.
B 192-660 to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection, attorney-client privilege, and work product. And 192.6602H, the first one was 2F, I'm sorry. This one is 2H, to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Electric guitar before, so he strummed the electric guitar the first time, and it was like, ooh, I got a new toy. All right, we are back in session. Coming out of executive session, we are to proceed as directed, let's say.
Thank you.
So back on record, we are going to go to presentations. We're going to skip through and go to presentations. Able Insurance presentation. Right into the hot seat.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Wendy. I think the microphone's off, but also, by the way, Able Insurance is our agent of record. They've been our agent of record for the last year, maybe two.
This is our second year.
Second year.
Second year.
And we obtained them after a few years ago. We actually did a request for proposals, and we had responses, and the board interviewed a couple of different insurance agents at least, and selected Able as our agent of record at that time. So
Correct.
I just wanted to give, we've had a few different elected officials since then, and I just wanted to make sure they knew the background. Sorry, Wendy.
No, not a problem.
Okay.
And CIS gives you a credit for having an agent of record. So you actually this last year got about $19,000 credit, and your cost to us is $15,000. So there was money, in a sense, from that standpoint, still saved by the county by utilizing our services and keeping it local with CIS from that standpoint. What I've done before you on your right-hand side, I want to talk a little bit about the current fiscal year and just kind of what-if scenario from the standpoint of worst-case scenario. On the left-hand side, I want to give you some information. You're going into budget. So this is not a formal proposal. We do not have formal rates from CIS yet for your property and liability, but we want you to be able to budget. And there's some significant factors that have happened over the last few years impacting counties, impacting different things within Oregon, so I want to talk about those. So on the right-hand side, liability. We made a change a couple of years ago, just 2 years ago when Amy and I came on. We changed to a retro plan, and that was also at the recommendation of CIS. That was their recommendation looking at the county's 10 years. We'd looked at it as well. We went back to them, to their underwriting managers for backing on that, and said it would be beneficial to the county looking at a 10-year history to change from a standard plan to a retro plan on your liability. That means that you pay less up front, that as claims occur, you could pay more. So you could have a savings, but you could wind up paying out more. So because of that, and being new positions, wanted to walk you through how those work. So your first scenario on there was the standard plan, meaning that you pay a premium, and they did make some changes. So it used to be you paid a premium and then you didn't pay anything more in claims. Well, because of employment claims and because of jail claims, they have changed that. So even if you were on a standard plan, you would still possibly incur additional costs from employment-related claims or jail claims when there was a lack of reasonable medical care. So that is something new that's changed in the past couple years. So that's the first scenario for you. You got your standard minimum premium,
and then looking at what claim costs, and I gave an example of just where we're at to date from that standpoint, what your costs incurred, and then what your total would be, with that exception being on the standard plan of employment claims or jail claims. The next two options operate exactly the same way. It's just a matter of what your deductible would be. It's an aggregate deductible. So you get a discount up front. You get a $45,000 discount up front for the $60,000 and a $52,500, I believe, discount on the $70,000. So you're paying a little bit less, but you would be paying more if you did max those out. So again, you get that upfront savings, and then the claims come in, and you're paying either $60,000 or $70,000, and then it stops. The last three are the retro plans, and that's where you see a 75, 115, 65, 120, or 60, 130. So the first number is the percentage that you are paying. So you're on the first one, you would be paying 25% less up front, but you could be paying 15% more. Okay. The 65, 120, you're paying that 35% less up front, and then you could be paying 20 more, and then you're paying 40% less up front and up to 30 more. The last one is the one that we went on. So the 60, 130 is the plan. So we were right now, in a sense, saving money. If you look at the cost incurred, that what line item that we have there, compared to if we'd been on the standard plan, what the cost incurred was, you're seeing right now, as we stand, the county is saving money over the standard plan. In a worst case scenario, if we pay out, we would be paying more, because we could be paying to 30% more. Any questions on how those work?
I have one question on, it seems like most of the liability for the county, or more of the liability for the county, would run through the jail services.
Yes, sir.
Is there any way to separate the two?
There is not. And in fact, that's what we're going to jump over over on the left-hand side, is to point out how significantly that is going to impact us this next year.
Okay.
So any more questions on those? Okay, then let us jump over to the left-hand side. The first item that you have is not Curry County. It's another county in Oregon. Just to give an example, I was asked to provide, since Curry County has been on the retro plan just for 2 years, you know, it's kind of hard to see how does it pencil out. So I was asked to provide an example from CIS of another county of doing similar operations, and what that has been on a plan for 10 years, so that you could see what their payout has been. So for that particular county, in the last 10 years, they've saved that $579,378 by being on a retro plan similar to what Curry County is currently on. You can see they've had ups and downs. So it wasn't savings every year. There was 3 years you're seeing in the red that they did have, it cost them more than a standard plan. But over a 10-year time period, there was a savings. So that's just an example for you on that one. The next page that we're going to look at is our actual budget. And if you could actually just set that one aside and look at the two diagrams that have colors. Those are going to show you your jail law enforcement. This actually came from CIS. They did their annual meeting at the end of February, talking about the trends in their cost. Employment claims had been high for several years. Now between police and corrections, the combination of the two of those in law enforcement has exceeded the employment claims. And that's what you see on that diagram there. If you look at the blue, you're seeing your employment, and then if you look at your orange and your maroon color, you're getting the rest of law enforcement, to seeing how those have escalated over the last 5 years. Then they also had the projection on your jails. So that's where they're looking at the increase. So because on the jails, they said, okay, if you don't have a jail, they're actually expecting those, any entities without a jail, their cost to maintain about even, to actually not have an increase. If they have a jail and if they've had claims, then they're seeing an increase. And they were projecting a 25% increase for Curry County.
Wow.
So that's then when we can get back to our budgeting factors, throwing that in. So that's just a little bit of history for you and why we're coming here on that factor.
You could have saved that to the end. No.
That is the end. So on your premium budgets, that one we've mapped through. The very last one would be giving you an example if we stayed exactly as we are on the plan that we're on the 6130 retro. And the very first one would be going back to what the county had been on a couple of years ago on the standard plan. So standard plan, you're paying all your money up front, other than employment claims and jail claims that you could have some additional cost on.
What's the liability of additional costs on those, whatever the claim ends up being?
For the jail claims, it's $10,000 per claim for the lack of medical care. There's some clauses around that and some stipulations.
But that's the maximum exposure on that?
The additional besides yes,
okay.
yeah, on the standard claim.
Okay.
Correct. On your employment claims, you're going to have a percentage up to $10,000. And if you could have additional, it's a don't call pre-loss. So there is an additional $15,000 on top of that if you have an employment claim and you don't take advantage of CIS's free pre-loss services. Okay. So they've been trying to that gets waived as long as you've called pre-loss, and then you're just into the percentage to 10% up to $10,000.
And we do that on any employment matter. We always get on the phone with CIS and walk them through the scenario.
Okay.
So taking those factors into account, we're looking, and then the other item down at the very bottom of those, all across all the same plans, we have a $25,000 per occurrence property deductible. That's to county property, not to damage we've caused to somebody else's, which comes under liability, but to our property deductible. So from budgeting.
The wind, pardon me, Wendy, the wind damage claims we just had to our dish towers, we had coverage for that, but we had to pay $25,000 of it.
Okay.
And if we've had another claim, if the claim was under $25,000, then the county would be, absorbing that cost.
So that's a per occurrence deductible, kind of like if you get in multiple car crashes or have multiple stereo thefts, it's not a capped deductible, it's every time.
Correct,
yeah.
That is. Versus when we look at these liabilities, when we look at the aggregate deductible, it's a cap. And even on the retro plan, there's a cap. So everything sort of builds up onto those. So if we're into an employment claim or a jail claim, those are all going to go towards those. Now, if we max out our aggregate or we max out the retro, those, and we still had an employment claim or a jail claim, those will continue. It won't stop on those. Just like on the standard plan, you would be having to pay out those additional costs. So any questions on how those work?
So,
Council Huddle?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. And so the question is I'm looking at the first sheet you gave us, the 2018-19.
Cost analysis?
Yep. Mm-hmm. So, and you mentioned some claim costs or costs incurred. Those are only, it's on the date the claim occurred, not the date you pay. Is that correct? In other words, these are claims that occurred in 2018-19, not claims we're paying in 2018-19, or is it, do you know what I'm saying?
So the claim cost calculation is from claims that have occurred in 2018-19,
right,
and payout has been made on those.
But
so your total possible cost with the max of them is going to still be for claims that occur in 2018-19, but you may not pay it until further down the road.
Good.
Once.
That's what we want.
Yes.
Yep, that's what I was checking. Okay, good. That helps.
Yeah,
Thank you.
So these are our projected premiums for 1920?
They are. So as I said, you're looking at about a 25% increase over the current year.
Can you talk a little bit about the market for liability insurance in Oregon?
CIS is, especially dealing with law enforcement, at those, there is not another market property-wise. We've been looking, you could pull out your property from CIS, other than CIS, because they did have entities doing that, said if you do that, you can't come back. So that had been because they had competitive rates out there in the standard market away from CIS, insuring people's property, especially getting into like the earthquake and the flood coverage, and trying to keep it competitive. As you remember, you guys are part of a trust. So anybody is a member of the League of Oregon Cities, that you're a part of, you have to be a member of that to then be part of the CIS trust. The CIS trust self-insures up to a certain level, and then they have reinsurance that comes in afterwards. So CIS is for cities and counties only in Oregon.
But we can't go out and get a State Farm or a Farmers or something similar like that that
No.
insures governments.
No, that actually, because CIS is so strong in Oregon, they are the main player on that one. CIS, if you does have other options within them for if you want to self-insure more, but they have a certain minimum premium amount that you're looking at from liability standpoint. You're looking at least $200,000 as your starting point, and then you can self-insure over that, and they from different programs.
And then going back to this, sorry, Mr. Chair, follow up?
Sure.
So going back to this sheet, the first one you handed out.
Cost analysis. Yes, sir.
Essentially, if we didn't have CIS and didn't pay a premium, we would have to pay all the costs of all the losses. It would basically be our option would be self-insurance, essentially.
Self-insurance.
Okay.
You could get additional coverage on the property side. We could go for your property, for the physical damage on the vehicles, liability, but for the general operations of the county, looking at for your law enforcement operations, that
Right.
you would wind up self-insuring.
And self-insurance usually is, the local entity insures themselves to, let's say, $500,000. Yep, and then they buy a reinsurance or a something like that. Okay.
I think our county's too small for self-insurance, actually.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, well, like I said, I just, trying to give you, there's limited players in the market, limited options for us. So, so what our options are is among these plans, I think, that
Right.
CIS is offering.
Yeah, because nationally, competitively speaking, there are probably competitive plans, but like you said, once you leave, if you're not happy, you can't come back, so.
Back to that, right. They recommend if you're thinking of reinsuring, what you're doing by doing the retro plan is normally the first step. You get situated and see how you do with that. You build up your reserves and your budgeting that you're setting aside each year, and seeing how that's working forward. And when you're budgeting and such, allows you to budget for that fiscal year a large enough, then you can move away from the insurance from that standpoint.
Okay.
But you're taking that direction right now by doing the retro plan.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions?
I have a question, Wendy.
Yes.
So on the liability cost analysis at the bottom, it talks about $10,000 per jail claims with medical care not readily available.
Yes.
Does that mean because we don't have medical care on staff in the jail that we're paying that higher price?
Correct. You could do, they look at either on staff or contracted services, and if you don't have those and there's a claim that occurs because they did not get that medical attention within a certain time period. There are some different caveats, so from the standpoint somebody needs to actually have been in the jail for over 8 hours. So you've got a time period in there, and then there's the determination of what is considered reasonable, care from that.
So if the hospital does do a contractual service with us down the road, then we could readdress the premiums?
It would not get away from the premium from that standpoint of that on there. There is some, if you have contracted services, you have somebody on staff that's there, or you contracted out, they do some discounts. Be looking at between $12,000 to $15,000 in discounted on your premium for that.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Boyce?
You just asked my question. Perfect.
Commissioner Gold?
Got it. Thanks.
Right.
I have one more.
Mr. Melzer?
Do you know offhand the percentage of what we're paying, what percentage is going towards the jail? And I guess I ask that because the county pays for the jail and we all use the jail, or all of our municipalities use the jail.
Correct.
I'm just curious what percentage of this is actually for the jail.
So if you're looking at your liability costs that we're on right now, and we can see that right now we're at about $173,000 of that. About 80% of that is actually jail.
Yeah, and that's why I asked a while ago if we could pull the jail off of our, and make it its own standing in policy.
$120,000 is, between, now you've got jail and that's law enforcement. So truthfully, jail is about $35,000 of that, and the rest of it is law enforcement. If you added back in their personnel, because there is a breakdown amongst all county employees based upon what their compensation is, it's a percentage. So if you took and you figured out what law enforcement's percentage of pay was, then you would have to add that on too. I don't have that figure.
Council Huddle.
Thank you. And We also had a meeting with staff and Director of Operations and Able Insurance, and we talked about, you mentioned if we don't have jail medical.
Yes.
I think the discussion turned to contracting for jail medical services, and then we mentioned that there's no other insurance mechanism available, but it seemed like we touched on a topic that if there was a contracted jail medical service, they might, instead of it being a county employee doing the work and therefore exposing the county, it would be an independent contractor who might have an insurance mechanism to cover a claim against that on the jail medical side or something. And I don't know how much information you have on that for the board today. And Julie Schmelzer, I don't know if you followed up on that or not.
I did. So Wendy and Amy had given us the name of a company that some other counties use to provide those services, and I did share that with the sheriff. And it's my understanding they won't come this far south to provide us that service. So we don't have access to that.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Commissioner Boyce?
I kind of see where you were going a minute ago. This is kind of a side note, but I think it's related in that the public that's paying attention to what we're dealing with right now, the insurance cost, $110 a day per inmate off of our county sheriff's budget. I wonder if this is factored into that cost. You know, that 110. I have a sense it probably isn't.
Well, the problem is right now, this county, and I'm in disagreement of the way it's done.
Well, it's every county is that way, though.
No, but I'm saying, I was going to finish my thought, though, is this county does not ask the cities to contribute to the services that the jail provides. And these are for future meetings with the incorporated cities in the county. But yes, we are going to have to address this at some point, because we cannot continue to absorb the costs, the rising costs of our jail, and not have any contributions from incorporated cities.
Mr. Chair, that's kind of my point, and I think I'm led to research a little bit and see if the insurance costs, I never would have thought it was 80%. I knew it was a good portion. That's very helpful, Ms. Abel. So if it's not included, then it's going to be over more, way above $110 a day.
Yeah.
Our actual hard cost. Thank you.
The CIS made the comment just over the last 5 years that jail costs, then they're looking at the claims that have occurred, that they've risen from 3.2 million to over 17 million.
Yeah.
So they're seeing that across. And if you
Is
go
that
back,
statewide, if I may ask?
it is statewide.
Yeah.
If you go back and I could get you more information, statistics, see if you want that, but if you go back into the 80s, jail claims, Oregon as a state was 33rd out of all the states when you looked at the jails. And now it's exceedingly different, you know, when you're looking at the increase and jail claims at that point in time when they came about, there was maybe only 6% of all jail claims that actually moved forward in some sort of a payout or a claim. And you're seeing a complete difference now in what's happening in a trend that's going on, that's impacting.
Okay, well, seeing the trends, well, go ahead, Ms. Schmelzer, go ahead.
I was just going to ask,
Yes.
knowing those trends,
Yes.
do you have a recommendation for us
Exactly what
as whether or not we should be doing a different retro plan and whether there's a specific amount we should be budgeting to be prepared for these?
So when we're looking at that budget estimate, you know, you have your total premiums, but then you have your liability deductible. So that's the thing to key when you're budgeting, is that where you're going to go on those from the standpoint of setting money aside, you know, in a line item in your budget to cover those plans. So even if you are, you know, so if you could take a look at your standard plan, even that you have there, and your total budgeting, you're needing to budget $358,000, which is still a big amount over where we were at this last year with that increase on that one. So if we could look over at the retro plan that we're currently on, and it's, you know, $120,000 less. If we could take the difference between those and at least get started with I mean, because if we're on the standard plan, that money's gone. Right. We pay that out, it's paid, and regardless of what happens for claims, it's gone. So if we could go with the retro plan and take the difference of what we would have and have that in a line item, you know, as a starting place in our budget, then we're not worse off from the standard, but we're going in a direction to make sure that we're not upside down.
What is the amount of exposure we have, though, between the two plans? I mean, that 6130 retro plan, what's the amount of additional exposure we have?
30%.
30%.
So it is 30%.
Well, I mean, Again, you're the insurance expert in the room, so where would you be if you were us? I know you're not allowed to legally advise.
Advise on that one.
But you can give hypothetical
Yeah, hypothetical situations. And whether maybe this is for a different standpoint because it's not budget, but maybe we'd be talking about another work session with risk management of seeing what services can we offer to bring in if our claims are coming from a jail standpoint. CIS has some excellent risk management services that they can bring in. And if we're not already utilizing those, is that something that we can do to help prevent proactively other ones from happening? So,
how successful have those plans been in other counties when they've taken advantage of them? Do you have any idea?
Yes, I did. If you take a look at that first example that I gave you from another county that's somewhere very close to us, you are looking at they've saved over 500,000.
Right,
So,
but they use those plans
Yes.
that you were talking about.
So,
Okay.
Yes.
so
And
over 10 years, on average, it was 50,000 a
Yeah.
year that they were able to.
yeah, they do have contracted out medical. So one of the factors you do take into account, which I'll need to go back to underwriting on that standpoint. I don't know that CIS was made aware that that would not be an available option. But when you have that contracted medical, you have an indemnification. So you're also transferring that risk to another party that helps lower that exposure. Now, if that's not available, we need to talk about that and
I wonder
why
if
should
UK
you
could
get...
add something to that. Ken Duque might be able to add something to that.
That's a good point. I don't know.
That they can possibly contract some of that. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Great, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amy, next time you come, please don't talk so much. You made me nervous.
I'm just here to take notes.
She's daydreaming about being on the river, and it's...
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Take care, guys. I mean, do we want to have any further discussion on this right now? This is kind of,
It's not a decision point at this time.
no,
but
I know,
it
but
will-
I just,
it'll
since
come
we're,
up.
since it's
Yeah.
on the table, do we
Yeah.
want to take a few more minutes and continue to talk about it? Ms. Cole?
I'm just thinking of all the costs that go into the jail, and most of them are there because of the incorporated cities, and I don't know whether they're paying anything into it, or could we research other counties? What do they do to maybe mitigate some of these costs? I have no idea.
Well, I've already done some of that, just so you know what it is. It is in the very near future. I'm going to deal with some of this with our next meeting we have coming up at the end of next week on our county summit. We are going to start to ask the cities to open a conversation to help mitigate some of the expenses that this county faces with not only the insurance and jail costs for food and everything else, but the actual upkeep of the jail and the staffing of it. So this is something that, like I said, we've got to realize that this county needs help, and everyone contributes prisoners to the jail, and we would like them to contribute some of the expenses to it, because it's not in the tax base. None of our tax money goes to our jail. It's separately funded.
So I'm going to ask Council Huddle a question. Is it illegal for us to charge
No, it's not.
the incorporated areas, or not?
No, we could charge bail.
Okay, so it's just like, this is history, this is how we've done it in the past, so we're going to keep doing it and sucking up. Excuse me, that's not very nice.
And there are
but-
counties in the state currently that charge their incorporated cities for jail services. It's not like this is new ground we're breaking into. And I'm sure, I would imagine the mayors and the city managers are expecting something like this, or may have been expecting it for several years, because it's not something new. It's been happening for quite a long time.
Well, it's a large expense, so.
Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm working with Assessor Colin on just simply going to our 47 taxing districts, possibly the schools being the exception, and just simply saying we need 2% to put into the assessor's office away from the general fund, and which would get 2 more appraisers, which would solve multiple problems. I proposed a 5% a couple years ago. Of course, the cities didn't take too good to that. But it's also another way to bring the county together. And some of this I think we may want to have an executive session because there's just some issues that I think I see this train coming at us so fast, and Ms. Abel there just referenced that, what's happening around the county or the state and what counties, especially rural counties, are dealing with. I referenced the Douglas example this morning in a kind of an indirect way. So yeah, we have a chance to be a little proactive here. Thank you.
Well, it's just, as we all know, the contract with Coos County just ended, and they were paying, I believe it was $106,000 a year for the use of 6 beds on an annual basis. And they weren't full all the time, you know. They were contributing to our jail. It's a normal business practice for incorporated cities to contribute to the jail and its services. So Curry County has never asked that because of the situation and the financial situation that this county was always in. They didn't have to ask it. Now things have changed, and cities, I'm pretty certain that cities understand that they are going to, at some point, going to have to contribute to the services that our jail offers.
And for what it's worth, about 55% comes from the cities, 45% comes from just the rural parts of the county, the unincorporated areas.
Yeah.
But it's still a good,
Well, we've got numbers on.
significant number.
I've got numbers already, the averages. I've actually, I think, shared them with both of you in different times in an email of exactly what each incorporated city and the county, what percentage of the beds they use in the jail. So, you know, and that would be a good way for everyone to pay their fair share, is to figure out how many beds a month you're using in that jail, and you pay that percentage of it. So whatever that number might be. All right. Ms. Colstrom, you are up.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Louise Colstrom, County Accountant. First I want to say that this is a presentation. I'll answer questions about the spreadsheets I'm going to give you, but the spreadsheets are for next week's work session. So these are, I didn't want to just give them to you in a packet for next week's workshop, because I'd like to do a little explanation on them first. So this presentation is just to go over these worksheets. I really don't want to talk about the proposed budget at this time. That's for next week.
Okay.
Okay. So the first spreadsheet I gave you, I went through the week of February 11th.
I don't think we received anything.
They were part of the packet. Yeah, it was in the packet.
Oh, I didn't print it. Okay, so hold on one second, please. Let me open this up.
I just brought mine.
Yeah, sorry,
do you
I
want me to
didn't
go
print
get
them
some
off.
copies of it for you?
How about if I run and...
That's fine. I can see them on here once this thing opens. It says the site can't be reached.
We're just having problems connecting.
And I'm just getting kind of snow here.
These are in color, and I don't have a color.
We don't have a thumb drive?
You have a color copier? Okay.
Mine's not open. Sorry, Julie.
So just a little background on the first handout is the week of February 11th, I had budget interviews with all of the department heads. When we do the budget interviews, we look at the year-to-date as of December, and we look at the current budget, and then we look at revenues and expenditures basically line by line, and we forecast what we're going to have between January and June. So we have an actual between July and December, and then we forecast or project January through June. So we have the current year's budget, we have a projected year, and then we also have 10 years in their worksheets of actuals. This is to help the department heads make decisions on what they need for their proposed budget next year. The proposed budgets will go out to them on April 5th. Those worksheets will go out to them. We haven't actually done proposed budgets yet. We usually do this workshop that's for next week first, so that if there's any kind of direction from the board about individual department budgets, that we can incorporate that when we send it out on April, is it the 5th? And then when they bring those back to me, then I give them about 2 weeks, and then I have 2 weeks to get it into a formal proposed budget document to hand out on May 5th. So that's where we are right now. I'm kind of waiting for Julie to come back with that. I don't have the sheets right now either. So, are there any questions about the budget interview process with the department heads?
Let me try something.
I actually sat in on some of that with you for a short time, and so I was pretty comfortable with the way it was done.
Would you want this?
I tried to get on there, and it wouldn't, well, not on that one, but on mine, it wouldn't even open.
Yeah, this one's already going, so maybe...
Here comes Julie.
Here comes authority.
Oh, she's got papers.
Oh, my God.
Thank you. They won't show the full sheet on the screen anyway.
Okay, good.
So.
This is going around in circles as well.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, pal.
I knew that was coming.
So the first spreadsheet we're going to look at is the one that's called 2018-19 budget. It's the forecasted ending fund balance, and it's as of, I did the calculations as of 3/6. This one probably won't change. The second sheet, I date it every time I update it, but I don't usually update the forecasted ending fund balance because that's already finished, and I don't really have any more forecasts for this year. So what I do is I go through and I put in the year-to-date revenue, and then I do the forecasted revenue, so I have the total forecasted revenue, and then I have the year-to-date expenses as of December, and then the forecasted expenses, and then I have the forecasted expenditures for the year. And then so the next one that has a little yellow at the top there, or orange, that's the total of that third column, or column 3, and then the total of revenue, and then the total of expenditures, and the forecasted ending fund balance. And then I also have the 18-19 budget in there, and the forecasted over or under by the end of the year of the budget. So any one of these departments that are under budget is a negative, and anyone that's over their budget, or it's a positive, and anybody that's over their budget is a negative dollar amount. Okay. That's forecasted of where they are over or under their expenditures. And or actually their revenues minus expenditures, their ending fund balance. So anyway, I have some numbers underneath that forecasted ending fund balance, that the 17-18, and I can't see this because it's tiny letters. Actual ending fund balance, so last year's actual ending fund balance was $4,647,000, so we're about the same as, this carryover balance will be about the same as the carryover balance that was last year. We budgeted in 17-18 $2,008,057, and what we didn't budget for was the SRS money that came in, was notified and came in during the year. It was not something that we knew about at budget time. And the forecasted ending fund balance, which again, the SRS notifications and money came in after we did our forecast, like this one. So the forecasted was a little bit under the budgeted ending fund balance, $2,008,047. So that's just some, that's kind of just a report on where I think the ending fund balance should be. I don't do that on a monthly basis. It's a lot of work. I probably won't do it again before the end of the year. This one has actually, unless we have some surprises like SRS money, I have been extremely close on my forecasting ending fund balance.
Good.
Once again, these forecasted numbers, the revenues and expenditures, come from the department heads of what they think they're going to do the rest of the year. The second sheet is titled 2019-20 budget, the general fund, and we call it a to-from contribution as of 3/8/2019. So what to-from means is these departments either take from general fund revenues or they add to general fund revenues. There's only one that actually adds to, and I think that is the solid waste. So the reason that these departments are in the general fund is because they are not standalone departments. They don't have the revenue to stand alone outside the general fund. So these are the departments that are funded by the general fund. So what I did was I took a estimate of the 2019-20 total revenue. These are static budgets. I have not added to any revenues. I have not really taken away unless it was extremely obvious. So this is kind of a static budget projection for next year right now. So then I have the different expenditures kind of have their own columns. So payroll has its own column, materials and services, other expenditures, and then your total expenditures. And then you have a 1920 estimate of to from the general fund. If you look at the very last line where it says general fund balance and go across, that means that the revenues minus expenditures for the total general fund is short of revenue by $256,000 with a static budget. But there's a couple of things that we're going to talk about that this isn't quite a static budget. And those are the numbered yellow things that are down there. And so number one, I removed the revenue and expenditures from the assessor's office for the pilot program that was in last year's budget that was not granted by the state. If we do another pilot program application to the state for the assessor's office, I think I would rather have it over in a grant fund rather within the general fund.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So the extra assessors that he would be hiring and everything would be actually over in the grant fund rather within the general fund like this time was. Number two is for the juvenile department. It does not include something that Director Lang spoke to me about, which is having a community services supervisory position for juveniles who are out doing community projects. I don't know the dollar amount of that right now. My understanding it is going to be fairly minimal, but I just wanted to let you know that it is not in these figures yet, although it has been discussed and is pretty much probably going to happen because that's what she needs to have happen. Number three, in the Sheriff's Department, last year at budget time, we discussed adding 4 road deputies to the budget. And so what was passed by the Budget Committee was to fund 4 deputies, 4 cars, and equipment for the 4 deputies at $480,000, and that $480,000 is going to budgeted to be a transfer out of the road. Everybody calls it the road fund, the road improvement fund. At that time, during those budget committee discussions, the sheriff was pretty adamant about the funding of those 4 road deputies continue into the future, so he doesn't have this type of revenue bouncing back and forth. One year he gets road funds, one year he doesn't. One year he gets them, and then next year he doesn't. So what I did was I reduced the amount of revenue from the 480 down to 300, which was the amount for their deputies by themselves. You need cars every year. They'll already have their equipment. So that does include a $300,000 transfer from the road improvement fund to fund those 4 deputies. And that's another thing that we could do, that we could put over into the grant fund so that that funding stays with those 4 deputies. We only bring over from the road improvement fund the dollar amount that was actually used. So we did buy the 4 cars, but we haven't got all 4 deputies. So we're not going to take all 480 this year. I don't know what that amount is. I have to wait till the end of the year to get that amount. I don't do that transfer till the end of the year to make sure that I only transfer what is required to make the Sheriff's Department whole for what they have done during the year using that money. If I do put it in a different fund, it would be the same scenario. If we have 4 deputies budgeted over there, and it's during the year we have 2, and during that year, maybe halfway through the year, we have another one, so we have 2.5. I would only bring over the money from the road improvement fund to cover what was actually spent on those 4 deputies.
Sounds sensible to me.
So so this might change a little bit. You know, I'll be talking to Director of Operations when we finalize budgets of what we're going to put over there, how we're going to do it. But just to let you know, that's probably what I am going to do, because it kind of separates that special type situation away from all the other operations of the Sheriff's Department. Number 4 is, I'm sorry we skip around here a little bit, but the 911 dispatch. In civil, criminal civil, and in dispatch, the sheriff has added a 1 point FTE for a records manager. At the meeting next week, he can expound upon why he needs that. I think he did explain it in a board meeting not too long ago. But it does add 0.25 under 911 and 0.75 under the Sheriff's Civil Criminal Department. Number 5 is code enforcement. One of the things that I did was, once again, code enforcement was kind of set up under non-departmental, and it was kind of swallowed by it. And to really know what code enforcement costs in the next, in this 2019-20 budget, code enforcement will have its own department. It won't be buried in the non-departmental. Over to, if you follow that line across, it's showing the $54,000 for payroll, but and $60,000 for materials and services. It doesn't currently have a budget, but that will be moved from. It's not an extra cost because it's already in non-departmental. It's just moving it to a different place. And right now, no matter what the cost is, It's all going under one line because they only had one line in non-departmental for the costs of code enforcement. But the new budget will have different lines for their cell phone or legal advertising or whatever else, professional services. They'll have different line items for all the costs of code enforcement rather than everything kind of stuck under one line item. So the last note I have here is this budget, static budget, does not include general fund costs for admin cost increases. So one of the costs is that the payroll in admin commissioner's office has increased. And the admin costs for commissioners is spread over all of the departments, depending on the size of their budget, whether they're in the general fund or not. Now, the ones that are in the general fund, they total about 43 to 45% of that cost. So you would have to add more cost to this $256,000 that we're short, of about $75,250. But that's also increasing your materials and services budget by $30,000. During this year, in January, we increased the travel budget by $15,000. So I'm assuming for half a year was 15, for a full year you would probably increase that travel budget over this year, 25 to 30,000. There's already almost 5,000 there. So, so I'm assuming, although we haven't made that decision yet and we haven't budgeted for that, that's an assumption that I made, that travel budget would be more than 15, and certainly more than 5,000 or so is currently budgeted. The other thing that I don't know is to be determined is another admin cost, and that's IT services. The year before last, they severely cut IT services budget. And last year, they kept it the same as the first year and did not increase it. There are several things that are happening in IT, one being the software costs that we are going to have to pay. And that's quite an increase from what we're currently paying. So we're going to have to budget for that. So that's going to increase the IT budget. The other one is we are in the middle of doing the inventory for the hardware to make sure that we have hardware that will support this new software license. And so that's all known at this time of what we might have to do to be able to have those software licenses on all the computers in the county. So that's where we are right now on IT. I expect in the next couple of weeks to know a little bit more about it, but right now they just the other day picked up all the inventories from all the departments, so they're working on checking what our hardware requirements are, and then we'll be meeting with Coos Curry Electric to look at what they call refresh, or what we need to keep continuous with our IT needs in the county. Okay. So that's the presentation. These forms are for you to look at and for us to discuss maybe in more detail next week, but I wanted to tell you what was going on these sheets in person so that you didn't have to get them and then just try to figure it out before I want you to be prepared for the meeting next week.
Thank you, Louise. Any questions?
I have a question. Louise, just for clarification, that number 1 on the assessor, that does not include the proposed 2 staff people he's looking at.
No, this is a static budget, and if next week at the workshop you direct me to include more staff for assessor's office, that's a time that we'll be talking about that. Anything else that you think of that you think needs to be included in next year's budget, or for us to consider. Now, we're not budgeting for next year. We're only discussing, because we can't discuss the budget before the budget committee convenes on May 5th, but we can do planning for the budget, and that's what we're going to do next week.
Okay, thank you.
Just giving us direction on what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Colstrom. All right, we are up to Director's Report. Ms. Schmelzer.
I will make it rather quick. Just an update on planning. We have Nancy Chester had agreed to stay on and help us through the transition with the new planning director, and that is pretty much coming to an end, I think. The transition period has gone well. Mr. Hitt was down there helping with some planning projects. He is on vacation right now. Ms. Crockett, the planning director, and I did sit down and talk about the duties that are down there and what it has been costing us so far for services. And we do think we'd be better off having a second planner, a planner down there full-time versus the 2 part-time people that we have right now. So that's something we're going to be looking a little closer at. With building safety, we still have not had any applications for our building official positions, so we did advertise it on the International Code Council website, which will get us a lot more attention. One of the problems with that, though, is will they have the Oregon certifications that we need? So that may be an issue as well. I did sit down with Daniel from Coos Curry, and we had a long talk about our IT services and expenses. He is putting together a long-range plan for our needs so that we can set money aside every year, like a capital improvement plan, so we're not facing any emergencies. But also looked closer at what each the tickets that he's closing, the time that's spent there, and breaking it down by department, so we could see where is the majority of the time being spent, what type of calls is being spent on. We think a good portion of those expenses we might be able to address just by a user's guide rather than calling CC every time that we need somebody to, our inbox is full, so we need our inbox emptied or something to that effect. I did reach out to Gene Merrill, a man from Josephine County. He runs the Josephine County Youth Partnership, and what he does is he provides internships and works with youth to get them job placements and job skills. And he currently was doing it through the Illinois Valley School. He's branching off and starting it as a nonprofit. And I did ask him if he would consider Curry County. He does do a lot of travel between Josephine and Curry. And so I asked him to look into that and see what that would cost and how it could benefit us and things of that nature. We do have our economic development program. We're just starting back up, but we are missing that element where somebody is working one-on-one with these students to get them placement. One of the things, as an example of what his program has done in the past, is if they have a student that perhaps has an internship but no transportation to that job, he provides them the transportation to the job. Or if they have an internship where they need steel-toe boots but they don't have the money for the steel-toe boots, they pay for the boots. So it's that type of thing. So it's to help prepare that workforce and get these kids some job skills.
Good.
Did ask the finance department to look into a purchasing and credit cards policy, so we would have one on the books. And just a little update, we did talk in the past about having some artwork done on our walls out here, and had suggested perhaps we have something from the veterans.
Yes.
And there was, that wasn't very favorable, so what I'm going to do is propose that it have to do with Curry County history, and then we'll have historic murals. So there was a concern that some of that artwork might trigger PTSD or some other concerns that people may have. So, still have to work out the details on that, have a review. Commissioner Gold, I'm hoping you can help with that since you have an eye for art, and set up some parameters and scope and basically give it a little bit more thought as time goes on here. So,
have you thought about, sorry to interrupt, but have you thought about maybe having some students from art?
I would like to open it up to the schools and to artists in general to see who's even available to do it. Because we don't have the money to pay for the paint, that may limit, I shouldn't say we don't have the money, we don't have that budgeted, and we haven't discussed that, but that may limit who is actually applies to actually paint on the walls. So.
Actually, that's the least of the costs. I'm thinking in terms of the artist's time, that's what...
Well, and there's also some places that donate used paint. A lot of times people will return paint. So a lot of those stores oftentimes will donate paint for mural projects. So it's, just in the very beginning stages of discussion, but we have a long way to go on it. But I just want to let you know that the theme has changed a little bit from what I was initially thinking.
And I can think of 2 or 3 local artists that would probably love to donate their time to work with youth on some kind of a mural program.
Right. And I think, it gets us a lot of interest, people coming through the building, people engaged in county government, but also just from a cultural aspect to add to our community. I think it's a good idea.
Sure, great idea.
That's all I have.
That's it. All right, Commissioner updates. Commissioner Gold.
Well, I was going to give you an update of what I have done on the health care issues in South Curry County. In January, well actually in December, I met with some representatives from the governor's office as well as OHA. In January, I met with David Brock-Smith and Jenny Razzo, did a presentation before the Curry Health District Board. Then I met with Janelle Howard, or manager of Brookings, and then I did a presentation for the Brookings City Council. So I'm just informing people about what's going on, and I think that's really important to get educated. And my thing is, let people know what their options are. We do have options, and then let them make their own minds up. I think part of the problem has been that people in Gold Beach area who are a part of the health district are very adamant that South County pay for whatever they get, and if a hospital comes in, I think those folks would be willing to pay. So that's what I've been doing. Thank you.
All right. Looks like Commissioner Boyce is going to get the last word today, because I'm next. I'd like to give kudos out to Harbor Sanitary District for their mentioning of David Fortman and as our code enforcement officer. Just a letter from them, and I will not read the entire letter, but basically talking about the last several years and the number of violations that are down there with recreational vehicles and dwellings, illegal dumping, raw sewage, and our waterways, and building code violations, on and on and on. He is, they're basically saying what a wonderful job he is doing and how much Harbor is appreciating his efforts down there. And I'm not sure of the numbers. I thought I saw in here somewhere that he had already had 49 or 50 violations that he's written. So he's a busy man. Another thing I want to talk about is the National Prescription Drug Take Back for April. It is the Curry County Sheriff's Office is taking back all unwanted prescription drugs on April 27th at the Curry County Sheriff's Office, or this at the substation at 16350 Lower Harbor Road, Suite 203 in Brookings, or at the Curry County Sheriff's Office at 29808 Colvin Street here in Gold Beach. It's a Saturday. It's from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. You can drop off any prescription drugs that you have, or any other drugs, I would imagine. And there will probably be no questions asked. It is imperative that you do this if you throw drugs in the trash can or put them into our waterways. I think there was a study done of some fish in one of the rivers that were positive for some crazy drugs. It was serious because people had dumped a lot of drugs into the river, and these fish were testing positive for it. So last fall, Americans turned in 457 tons of unwanted prescription drugs. So our sheriff is asking you, as is Corporal Jeremy Crone, to please come down to either the Lower Harbor substation or here to the sheriff's office on the 27th, which is Saturday, and and this is April 27th, not this 27th, at 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. To turn in all your drugs that are that you're not going to use anymore. Another kudos to Mr. Christensen, our roadmaster. I know he doesn't like to brag much, but I'll poke him a little bit here. I'm not going to talk about everything that he's in the process of receiving, but he is working hard right now to get some chip seal projects done and secure funding for that. We don't have finals on any of that yet, but I just want the county to know that our roadmaster is working hard to redo the road to Agnes, as well as redo and reseal the, that was Jerry's Flat. The other one was Jerry's Flats Road, I think it was. I think for right now, that's all I have, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, you get to go last. You can respond a little bit. When it comes to the hospital, I don't know any Gold Beach people that think that Brookings folks should pay anything disproportionately. In fact, the Port Orford and Gold Beach people are supporting the hospital. Most people I run with absolutely feel like it's an opportunity to bring the county together. I hope we have time, overtime, to discuss options that I see referenced in the letter that went to the governor. I'm not familiar with those options. Maybe I'm missing something there. Also, there was one comment that went out on a radio interview that this is a very dysfunctional board, and you did hear public testimony today that we've spent $250,000 in the 3 months we've been in conducting the new board responsibilities here. I think over time I will take the responsibility of proving that is absolutely inaccurate and to the contrary, particularly if you compare it to the amount of money that went out the last 2 years over my continual objections. To the murals on the wall, I was elated to hear that it might be a tribute to the veterans, and now I'm sad to hear that you've had some different citizen feedback. I'm going to click on here my veterans tour that I worked on with David Brock Smith. It is, oh, maybe I can hit that right there. This is a loop tour program that you can start it right here in our own Gold Beach facility. Memorials to our veterans. This is the one in Central Point. If you haven't been there, that's probably my favorite. I think you've heard me say before, I used to take my grandkids there every time I possibly could. And whatever sequence you want to go. Certainly the Eagle Point National Cemetery. It is absolutely breathtaking. Working our way back to Merlin. My oldest grandson and I spent 2 hours there a year ago. Not quite a year ago. You're familiar
Can I
with
just
that?
make a comment on that one
Certainly.
in Merlin? What is really, something really nice that the county is doing over there is, so they have these pillars and you can engrave your loved ones' names on there. And the county this year actually contributed money for people that would not be, that could not afford to get their loved ones' names carved on there. So the county is helping out with that. Kind of a neat idea.
Then you move north on I-5, you go to the Veterans of War Remembrance Wall in Roseburg. Just absolutely fabulous. And then, of course, to North Bend, the David Dewitt War Memorial. I'm proud of any way that the county can promote this. I don't think that these memorials, no disagreeing spirit here, Director Smelzer, but I don't think it contributes to PTSD. If it does, it would be in a non-direct way and hopefully a beneficial way. And so I have not had ample time to follow through on this, but over time, I think in a combined collective way, we have the best group of Veterans Memorial and quite a contrast, uniqueness in that loop. Yeah, and there's more that are not on here. Those are the 6 main ones in Southwest Oregon. So I'm going to be just a little bit encouraging on maybe a second look at what we might do in decorations to our program here. Emergency request, I'm working, this is the one that has to do with sudden oak death. We're also trying to get a Curry County separate federal disaster declaration for the highway. So I'll be giving a report on that at some point in time. Yes, I've been to a lot of board meetings and all that over, Southern Oregon Workers Investment Board, which I would like to give you some notes from just yesterday, in fact, and the Travel Southern Oregon Board, certainly Curry Community Health. Lastly, I think I'm going to have some very qualified people give a report on wild horses, the fire abatement. This is a Ninth Circuit Court ruling here that, in fact, has ruled that these are native to North America. Not as important, but I think certainly noteworthy. There's a program right now. They're going to stop the slaughter of these horses because of BLM cannot afford to the care and custody of them, and so they're offering certain areas $1,000 per horse. And so this is not a report, this is just a general note that I'm offering here. One horse perhaps for every 300 acres, especially in an area like Nevada where the food is pretty sparse, 30 acres will support a horse. So one for every 300 acres in the wilderness. They'll go so deep in there we'll never see them, and they'll eat ground fuel. I could talk on this quite a bit, but like I say, I have people that are way more qualified than myself. But I'm excited that the county can maybe reconsider that. And I think once the folks that have been in opposition learn of this Ninth Circuit Court ruling, that was the biggest, understandably the biggest concern that people had, introducing a native species. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have.
Anything further? This meeting is adjourned.